Chapter 523. Wu Zhen shook her head. Of course, she wouldn't tell him why she was checking the hotel's surveillance cameras. That colleague had a good relationship with her. Even if she sensed that Wu Zhen was acting weird today, she didn't say anything. After all, compared to them, Wu Zhen's performance was much better. It was rumored that she would be promoted soon. It's true that things haven't been peaceful recently. The colleague smiled and said, "It's normal for you to be so worried. You don't know, but I heard from the people in the General Investigation Department that a hacker who disappeared for half a year has appeared again. Now the higher-ups are warning us to be careful. That person used to be active in America, but this time he seems to have come to our country." Wu Zhen heard her colleague's words and suddenly looked up. "Is the hacker you mentioned called Z?" "I don't know the specifics." The colleague shook his head. "You should ask the higher-ups about this kind of confidential information." With this answer, the first thing Wu Zhen did when she returned to the police station was to apply for a transfer to the crime squad. The bureau chief's surname was Huang, and he was a big-bellied man. He was good at talking like an official. "Hurry up, Miss Wu, hurry up and take a seat. I saw your application form, but you know how busy we are. We work day and night. Whenever we encounter a case, we don't even have time to sleep. If you come, I'm really worried that you won't be able to handle the intensity of the work." Wu Zhen looked at him, her voice laced with displeasure. "Director Huang, that person was here too. His status was higher than mine, so why aren't you worried that he wouldn't be able to handle the workload?" Director Huang wanted to say, "How can that be the same? That's a talent. I have to provide for you. You don't really like their team, right?" Wu Zhen was smart, her voice calm. "If you let me turn around, I'll bring that person along." Director Huang's fingers paused, then he smiled. "That's impossible, he's no longer involved in cases." "It depends on who says it and how they say it." Wu Zhen is very confident about this. Director Huang wasn't one to make promises. Even though he was plump, his eyes were bright. "Since that's the case, little Wu, invite China's best criminal psychologist back. Once he's back, the crime squad will host a welcome party for the both of you." "There's no need for a welcome party. It's not like Director Huang doesn't know his personality." Wu Zhen smiled. "There's just one thing." Director Huang arched a brow. "Speak." "I heard some news that some places have suffered from cyber attacks recently. Could it be the Z that he wanted to catch back then?" The Wu family was a businessman and Wu Zhen knew how to exchange goods for goods. The smile on Director Huang's face disappeared. "Who told you about this?" "Director Huang, you don't need to know how I know, just tell me if it's true or not." Director Huang placed his teacup down, placing his hands on his chest. "That's right, based on his modus operandi, we suspect him to be the culprit." "Modus operandi?" Wu Zhen arched a brow. "I mean, how did you lock onto him?" Director Huang remained silent. Wu Zhen smiled. "Let that person come back. There has to be a case that he's interested in." "A message left behind after the cyber attack," Yi Zichen said. Director Huang pondered for a moment before pulling the drawer open. He took out a photo and passed it to Wu Zhen. Wu Zhen took the photo and saw the words, "I'm back." Chapter 524. The thin sunlight shone down. The school was full of noise. For Fujio, school life was one round of exams after another. The final exam was after the new year. It was a pain in every high school student's heart, but it was also an excuse to find the Almighty. She could continue to ask the Almighty for help. But now Fujio was different from before. Even the handsome scene of the youngster twisting his neck in class would be posted on Tieba in the next second. "Ah, my big spade is so handsome." He is still biting his pen. He looks so serious while doing the questions. Someone said that my big spade can climb over walls. He strongly requested a wall climbing picture. I suggest that everyone go to number 1 middle school and watch when he climbs over walls and takes pictures. I won't challenge him. I'm a chef, so I'm going to apply for a job in number 1 middle school's cafeteria. What does Big Spade want to eat? I'll give him 2 plates. No one knew why. Maybe it was because of the words Fujio said at the entrance of number 1 middle school when she was protecting He Honghua. Some of the aunties decided to become her fans. Of course, those aunties included. Movie queen and, look, another photo of my son is posted on Tieba. This angle is so handsome. Movie queen and showed her phone to Chi Nemo, who was sitting next to her. Doesn't it look like the cat you had before? I didn't expect my Gio to be so obedient in school. He looks so cute when he writes with his head down. Chi Nemo put down his chopsticks and wiped his hands with a piece of tissue. His smile was a little cold. Obedient? Good grades? That guy's physics grades are terrible. His mother may never know. Yes, obedient, handsome, and cute. Movie queen and looked at the photo and then at her son's handsome but cold side profile. My dream is to have a son like this, and I've been trying to guide you in this direction. Who knew? But it didn't matter. It was the same with Junao. He was too fair. Secretary Liang heard this and started to look up at the sky, pretending to be busy. Chi Nemo was about to say something when his phone rang in his pocket. It was a WeChat message. Brother Mo, is it convenient for me to go to your house for revision? Chi Nemo looked at the screen, recalling Jiang's words. He placed his phone back into his pocket. Ever since that, Secretary Liang noticed that his CO was a little absent-minded. His absent-mindedness lasted until the group meeting an hour later. He stood behind Chi Nemo and watched as his CO picked up and put down his phone for the 7th time before picking it up again. His slender fingers slid across the screen as he replied, yes. When Fujio received the Almighty's WeChat message, she was standing in front of the school supermarket with a lollipop in her mouth. One hand was in her pocket, and the other was typing. Her silver hair was down, and only the side of her face could be seen. Have you heard? What? That person from Class A was called into Teacher Hao's office again. Her grades have been dropping a lot recently, so it's normal for Mr. Hao to call her. Why do I feel that something is strange? Chapter 525. Shui Yaoyao came to the supermarket with Fujio, but Shui Yaoyao was the one who paid for the lollipops. Shui Yaoyao came out a little late because she had to pay the bill. However, it was obvious that Shui Yaoyao had heard the conversation. She looked up at Fujio and said hesitantly, actually, Your Highness Jio, I have a favor to ask of you. Say it. Fujio took out the lollipop and threw it into the bin. It didn't taste right. Shui Yaoyao glanced up. I know the student from Class A they were talking about. I used to be in Class A too. She's always been under a lot of pressure in school. Her family is different from ours. Her mother cares about her grades a lot, but lately, I keep feeling like something happened to her. She told me that she's afraid to come to school. Fujio raised her eyebrows and her eyes flashed. Go on. Shui Yaoyao nodded. That teacher likes to talk to her and doesn't give her any face. But even so, I don't think she'd want to commit suicide. Fujio suddenly stopped. Suicide? Suicide is a bit too much. I mean, she seems to have some psychological problems recently. She always sends me WeChat messages late at night, saying that she doesn't want to live anymore. Shui Yao held the phone she had just bought, her face full of worry. I understand how she feels. If you hadn't appeared at that time, I wouldn't have been so brave, and I wouldn't have become who I am now. Fujio interrupted her. Yao Yao, you have to believe that people are what they are. Your essence is there. Even without me, you would have become who you are through other means. But your friend is a little strange. Can you show me your chat history? Yeah. Shui Yaoyao immediately swiped her phone open. Some things are her privacy, but these aren't. Fujio's eyes darkened as she read the conversation on the screen. Shui Yaoyao smiled bitterly. She used to tell me everything, but now she feels like I betrayed her and I don't even care about her. I could understand how she felt. She was alone and not fated to help. Some people, after experiencing something, even if he had a lot of friends around him, will also be in the most need of a hug when all has been defeated. It seemed like there were some things that no one could understand no matter how he explained them. Thus, he decided not to say anything. More and more so, it became more and more silent. The more he fell silent, the more despair he felt. He couldn't see where his exit was. When Fujio saw those words, she turned her head and said in a faint voice, Yao Yao, do you know? What? Shui Yao Yao looked at him in confusion. Fu Jiu looked at her. Only those who are born in the dark can understand the thoughts of those who live in the dark. Yao Yao didn't understand. But at that moment, she felt that there was something different about the youth in front of her. But what exactly was the difference? She couldn't say it. After the lunch break, Fu Jiu didn't return to the classroom. No one knew where she had gone. At the end of the long corridor were individual offices for each teacher. The young man walked forward slowly with his hands in his pockets. He didn't seem to be worried about being captured by the surveillance cameras. The office door was not closed. He could faintly hear the sounds coming from inside. Chapter 526. Teacher, I'm not willing, please. Don't make me call my parents. I'm really working hard in my studies. Silly child, this isn't about your studies, you know what I mean. Fu Jiu stopped, and there was only darkness left in her eyes. She couldn't appear directly. The skateboard beneath her feet moved. A loud bang came from the door. Who's there? A middle-aged man walked out, looking left and right as though he was afraid of being discovered. Of course, Fu Jiu wouldn't let him see her figure. Her tall and straight back was against the wall, and her eyes were indifferent. When the girl saw the skateboard, she lifted her head abruptly, turning towards the end of the corridor. Was it Fu Jiu? The middle-aged teacher narrowed his eyes. Looks like it's not a good time to talk anymore. Go back to class first. As for other things, I advise you not to speak carelessly in front of everyone. Otherwise, you know very well what the consequences will be. You're a student, you should study hard and speak less. Most importantly, you shouldn't slander others. The teacher needs to prepare for class. You should go. Yes. The girl held onto her report card, her fingers trembling as she walked. When she caught sight of the person behind the wall, her eyes widened. Why aren't you walking? The teacher asked from behind. The girl watched as the clean young man pressed his thin lips against his lips and made a shushing gesture at her. The teacher arched a brow. Li Mengran? It's nothing, teacher. I just wanted to say that I've remembered everything you said. Li Mengran turned back, forcing a smile. Only then did the teacher stop walking forward. I knew you were a smart kid. Smart? Cowardly. Li Mengran clenched her fists. She pretended as though nothing had happened and continued walking. The teacher turned back, closing the office door. At this moment, Fu Jiu walked out, lowering her lids to look at the reddened girl. She passed her a lollipop, smiling faintly. Are you in a bad mood? Sorry, I lost control of the skateboard and knocked into something I shouldn't have. Li Mengran knew the youngster was helping her out. There wasn't a single person in number 1 middle school who didn't know him. The prince who skateboarded through the school grounds. He was free and easy, handsome and gentle, just like the light. No matter how dumb Li Mengran was, she knew that there was no such thing as a skateboard going out of control. It was because the young man heard something that he helped her out of the predicament. It was just that that kind of thing was too embarrassing to talk about. Li Mengran clenched her fists. After a long while, she said, I didn't do it, I didn't want to. I believe you. Almost in the next second. That was all the youth said. Without the slightest hesitation. These were nothing. It was the next sentence. It must be tough for you to fight against all of them alone, right? Li Mengran couldn't describe how she felt when she heard those words. It had been too long. It had been over 20 days. Time seemed to drag on for her. Ms. Yang knew that she was weak and focused on her grades, which was why she had always been like this. Such a thing. She didn't know how to tell others. She was even afraid that if she said it, people would say, look, that person's grades aren't good, but he seduced a teacher. She was too afraid of some gossip. Those groundless remarks. It was almost more hurtful than a real weapon. Therefore, she did not dare to say it. Chapter 527. It wasn't that Li Mengran didn't want to tell her mother, but in her mother's eyes, results were the most important. Even though their family was well off, they were still a working family. Her mother's circle seemed to always be comparing children, especially during Chinese New Year. They compared age, maturity, and most importantly, results. She had just entered her second year of high school. She was expected to get into the top schools in the country. Li Mengran felt suffocated. But she could overcome all of this. The most unconquerable thing was when the aunties mentioned results, her mother would look at her with a gaze that seemed as though she was about to give up. After every gathering, her mother's face would darken. Even though she wouldn't flare up at her, she wouldn't say a word to her while driving. Hence, Li Mengran didn't dare to tell her mother about this. Because her mother had always said that Teacher Yang wasn't bad, she even called to say that she wanted to tutor you. This time, you had to work hard and get good results during Chinese New Year. Then she would bring you to the beach. Li Mengran knew that the tutor wasn't an ordinary tutor. She was afraid. Hence, whenever the day came, she would switch off her phone and refuse to go to the tutor. She was disobedient 3 times in a row. One day, her mother finally called out to her. "What do you want? Is it so hard for you to study?" Li Mengran explained. "No, I just feel that Teacher Yang, I'm really disappointed in you." Her mother was also an intellectual, hence, she never lost her temper. But because of this, Li Mengran couldn't bring herself to speak. She had been suppressing something deep in her heart. She couldn't say it to anyone. She could only stay in her room, hugging her legs and leaning against the wall, wishing to disappear. Because only by disappearing would she not have to face all of this. But the next day, the sun would still rise. The tutor became her greatest fear. After listening to Li Mengran's words, her gaze wavered. She couldn't help but reach out to pull the girl into her arms. That embrace was filled with guilt. No one knew who Fu Jiu owed to. Only she knew. If only she had been faster back then. That bouncing girl who loved to lean on her back would never have left. But as a friend, she only cared about her identity as Hacker Z. She did so many things for others, but she couldn't even protect the people around her. This time, it wouldn't happen again. Fu Jiu's eyes darkened. After sending Li Mengran back, he raised his hand and looked at his phone. There was also a message from Almighty Qin. She always believed that the most dangerous place was the safest place. No one would think of hacking into a network in the military compound, as long as the Almighty gave her 3 minutes. She could do it without anyone knowing. Is it convenient for me to go over now? Fu Jiu felt that other than making a move, the most important thing was that she wanted to see the Almighty. Because she could only see that man. Only then would she be able to suppress the surging hostility. I can't let myself turn completely black. Now, whenever he closed his eyes, the Christmas card that he had left at home would appear in his mind. The handwriting was clear and lovely, just like the face in his memory. Z, you think I don't know you're Z. You did very well. Always like this. Don't look back. Don't worry about anyone. He walked down happily. Also, I am very happy to have you as a friend. Chapter 528. Li Mengran's appearance reminded Fu Jiu of something from a long time ago. All these years, she hadn't changed, probably because of the words that person had left for her. When she first came into contact with computers at the age of 6, Fu Jiu's father had taught her countless times, Z, you have to control your abilities, don't let your emotions get the better of you. You have to know that some abilities can become destructive if you can't control them. She thought she was rational enough. But reality proved that she wasn't. After her father passed away, she used Z's nickname to become active on the internet. At that time, many people were infatuated with Z. They felt that this hacker was cool and arrogant, especially when she took down the bad guys. Fu Jiu thought that no one would find out that she was Z. But in reality, even if you could fool everyone, you couldn't fool those who truly cared about you. Some people wouldn't tell you even if they knew all your secrets, they would only smile at you. Even after you returned home, they would squat at your door, rubbing their legs while saying, "My mom made your favorite boiled meat. I've been waiting for you for a long time, why are you so late? Look, it's already cold." At that time, Fu Jiu felt that she was the righteous one. Sometimes, because of the case, she even forgot about her friends who needed her the most. When that person wanted to talk to her about something, she hugged her laptop, replying without lifting her head. "I'm busy." She wouldn't even appear in school for a few days. Hence, by the time she found out, she had already lost all warmth. Suicide, what kind of pain did she have to go through to commit suicide? She couldn't accept the departure of such an important person. They grew up together, went to school together, discussed the type of guys they liked, and even went to the toilet together after class. What exactly did she want to say to her at that time? Fujio only found out after reading the diary. Some things would always be buried under the glamour. Just like these beasts, they dressed like humans, but they liked to lay their hands on some very young girls. That was the first time Fujio had wanted to kill someone. Second day of school. Before she had even established her outlook on life. She had even thought of countless ways to kill that scumbag. She had even taken action. If it wasn't for the Christmas card on the table, she would have taken action that very afternoon, becoming a murderer through and through. There was such a kind of person in this world. She was beautiful, smart, cute, and delicate. She would suddenly jump on your back when you were in a mess, but when you needed silence, she would accompany you with a smile. Something you don't want her to know. Even if she knew, she wouldn't expose him. She will help you keep all your secrets. Because she doesn't want to hurt you. She wants to protect you. Even though she's weak, she's helping you cover up some things. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lied to the police that you don't know how to use a computer. What about her? What had she done? She was defending what she felt was right when her friends wanted to talk to her. It was the small matter of garlic sprouts on the internet that could not be verified. It probably started from that moment. Fujio began to change. She knew what was important. What should she do with her ability? She had to protect those people. Those who desperately wanted to speak but couldn't. Chapter 529. In the end, Fujio successfully sent that teacher to prison. But what Fujio didn't expect was that in just 3 years, that person appeared in front of her again. Obviously, that teacher had forgotten about her. He changed his name and was still living well. Fujio watched as that person used his family's connections to become a tutor. She questioned herself for the first time. What exactly was black and what was white? Her best friend had experienced the most painful things at the most brilliant age. Why did some women say that it was her own fault? Why didn't the teacher find someone else, but a little girl like her? But what about that scum? A famous tutor? That day, Fujio put down her high school textbook. When she got home, she turned on the laptop that she hadn't touched for 3 years. Z returned. She began to realize that some things weren't so healthy. That was because everyone's worldview was different. It had nothing to do with age or identity. Some people felt more at ease when they did something wrong. Anyway, they wouldn't lose anything. Even if they did, it wouldn't be a serious loss. Being despicable was always the path of the despicable. Since no one punished her, then she would punish her. She was destined to be a villain. From that day on, she put on a disguise. During the day, she was like an ordinary person, eating instant noodles and playing games. At night, she turned into Z and started to punish a series of evils. Fujio lowered her eyes. She originally wanted to restore her identity after the National League. But this case was different. She had to take care of it. Since Hoshino was here, then it was time for them to continue their work. Fujio's eyes flashed. It was still the same school where she climbed over the wall. While the security guards were still there, she blocked the cars from entering. Fujio kicked the tree trunk with her long legs and held onto the wall with her left hand. With a push, she flipped over. Her movements were cool and beautiful. So when the uncle who was baking sweet potatoes saw Fujio, he quickly recalled her. "Young man, your skills are at the national level, right?" Fujio wasn't in the mood to joke with the uncle today. She walked to the middle of the road and took a taxi. She sat in the back. The taxi driver saw a high school student with a backpack and raised his eyebrows. "School hasn't ended yet, right?" Fujio took out her homemade notebook and said casually, "Skip class." The chauffeur shook his head. As he drove, he listened to the sound of keyboard typing in the back seat. Could it be that he had misheard? The young man was clearly holding a book in his hand. Everyone was curious, and the driver was no exception. While waiting for the red light, he looked back and found that it was indeed a laptop. He couldn't help but exclaim, "The electronic devices nowadays are really getting more and more advanced. They even have this." Fujio responded with a grunt, and her fingers moved quickly. Strings of codes appeared on the screen. The driver smiled again and said, "You are also playing games, right? My son is the same. He especially likes to play games, but he has been using his cell phone recently. He plays Hero every day. He even says that it's filled with elementary school students. It's a little tricky." Fujio's words and posture convinced the driver that she was playing a game. Therefore, the driver didn't say anything else. Chapter 5:30. A mailbox that had disappeared for half a year was reactivated. But this mailbox was very special. The two of them wouldn't talk to each other directly. And just like before, Fujio wouldn't leave her specific contact information. The email that Fujio sent out would automatically be destroyed after the recipient finished reading it. On the viaduct that was filled with traffic, an ordinary taxi sped past. The silver-haired youngster in the back seat lowered his eyes. His fingers moved slightly, and there was a clear and loud sound on the keyboard. "Yes, I'm still here." It was just 4 short words. When it suddenly popped up on the screen, there were special effects. And it was the kind of black words that would disappear in the next moment after appearing. All of them indicated that the person who replied to him was Z. Hoshino's gaze paused. He was still sitting on the high-speed train, but there was only the screen in front of him in his amber eyes. Then he smiled slowly. That smile made the girl sitting next to him unable to stop her heart from beating rapidly. He was so handsome that he looked like a star from a TV show. And he was dressed differently from ordinary men. A pure colored sweater matched with the gold-rimmed glasses, making him look as clean as the sun. He knew that person wouldn't leave. Hoshino wouldn't rush Z to tell him where she was. Because he knew that when Z needed him, she would let him appear in the right place. So he wasn't in a hurry. Hoshino looked at the screen again. When he looked up again, he was completely different from before. He was originally going to the south to find someone. He got off at the next station and took the high-speed train back. There were so many people in China, so no one would care if he changed trains midway. The weather outside was getting colder and colder. Taxis couldn't enter the military compound. Fujio got off at the entrance. She carried her school bag on one shoulder and stuffed her left hand into her trouser pocket. She lowered her head and played with her phone. "Brother Emma, I'm here." There was no reply. Fujio didn't care. But when the soldier on duty saw that it was Chin Mo who came to pick her up from afar, he put his right hand on the side of his head and gave a solid military salute. Fujio followed the sound and looked up. She saw that the man didn't even wear a jacket. He was wearing a white shirt and a tie. He was so handsome and abstinent that he didn't fit into the military compound. "Open the door and let him in." Chin Mo's voice was still faint. But after saying this, he added another sentence. "There's no need to stop him if you see him in the future." The two soldiers standing guard looked at each other and saluted again. "Sir." Chin Mo's gaze landed on the youngster in the school uniform. "Why you still standing there?" Fujio smiled. In order to prevent the Almighty from noticing that she wasn't in a good mood today, she simply smiled. "I'll wait for Brother Mo to give me a victory hug to commemorate my second successful wall climbing." Chin Mo arched a brow. He didn't care if the young man was just joking or not. He strode over. One of them reached out and pulled her into his arms. Fujio paused. "Really?" Chin Mo pressed down on the youngster's back with one hand, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Why, you dare to flirt but don't dare to take responsibility." Sure enough, meeting the Almighty always had a way to get rid of her unhappy emotions. Fujio's chest couldn't be too close to Chin Mo. However, that familiar aura was like a towering mountain that always made people feel at ease. But the Almighty's words weren't so cute. Chapter 5:31. Physics book. "Brother, can you not say that when we're hugging?" Fujio pursed her pale thin lips. "I feel dizzy." Chin Mo glanced at the youngster and said slowly, "Then what do you intend to use to make me tutor you?" Hearing that, Fujio suddenly remembered that she originally wanted the Almighty to help her guess the questions, but because of what happened afterward, she didn't go back to the classroom. Instead, she just carried a notebook and went out. Chin Mo arched a brow when the person in front of him didn't speak. Fujio smiled lightly and said frankly, "Actually, the topic wasn't the main point. I just wanted to see Brother Mo. Physics was just an excuse." After hearing this, Chin Mo's fingers paused, the corners of his eyes lifting slightly. The two soldiers at the side tried their best to maintain their dignified image, but they still couldn't help but glance over. After all, his words were quite lethal. Fujio continued to laugh. "If you don't believe me, I'll go back and get the book now." "No need." Chin Mo glanced at the youngster again and changed the topic. "As far as you are concerned, it doesn't matter if you have a physics book or not. It's all astronomy anyway, isn't it?" Fujio had to admit that the Almighty wasn't wrong, but if she kept telling the truth, she would lose friends very quickly. Seeing that she wasn't moving, Chin Mo added, "Since you're here, don't go back. Your physics book doesn't matter." It was obvious that he wanted Fujio to go with him. The clever Fujio smiled lightly. "Thank you, brother." Secretary Liang stood not far away and saw everything. Their CEO had rescheduled an important meeting to tomorrow morning so that he could tutor young Master Gio. If others knew of this news, it would be strange if they didn't have the wrong idea. Most importantly, he didn't even bring his physics textbook. Was this really a make-up lesson, not a date? No, he couldn't think like that. Madam was at home. Furthermore, when did young Master Gio become Madam's son? Madam had been dressing up and had asked more than once when her Gio would arrive. Her house? Secretary Liang really didn't expect his wife to be a fan of Spade Z. In the afternoon, Madam turned on her phone. She even said that since her Gio wasn't here, she wanted him to play a few rounds with her to practice his skills. He said, "Sorry, Madam, I don't know how to play hero." Madam looked at him in surprise. "You don't know how to do it?" Then he shook his head. "Too stupid." Secretary Liang. This feeling of being mocked by a goddess? "Young Master Gio, I just want to ask you, why are you playing hero with your wife?" Movie Queen and had a different feeling. Knowing that Fujio was coming, he didn't go out to buy anything. Instead, he sat on the sofa and drank his tea elegantly, but his eyes kept looking outside. Speaking of which, Er's expression hasn't looked good for the past 2 days. He's going out with that face. Will he scare my Gio away? Movie Queen and turned towards Aunt Zhang. Aunt Zhang had met Fujio before, and she had a good impression of the young man. Young Master Gio isn't someone who only looks at the surface, so he definitely doesn't care about his attitude. You're right. Movie Queen and smiled, her side profile beautiful. In fact, she liked Fujio so much. How could it be simple? It was because the other party had brought him along to play 2 rounds of the game. Chapter 5:32. They were most worried about Chin Mo's problem. They were afraid that he was hiding everything in his heart, becoming more and more indifferent and unapproachable. If that was the case, no one would understand what he was thinking. That kid had been indifferent to relationships since he was young, and after that incident, he was even more distant from everyone. Recently, Movie Queen and could clearly feel that her son had changed. Although she still couldn't understand what he was thinking. But at least he looked like a normal person. As Movie Queen and was thinking about this, she heard Auntie Zhang say, "Madam, young Master Gio came with us." Hearing that, Movie Queen and didn't sit down anymore. She stood up and walked towards the entrance. Fujio didn't expect to be treated so warmly by Movie Queen. For example, "Come on, eat your cake. You must be hungry after finishing your homework." Fujio ate whatever she was given. But homework? What kind of joke was that? She never did homework. So after she swallowed the cake, she asked, "Homework?" "Yes, homework," Movie Queen and said as she pulled out the photos on her phone. "Look at how serious you are in your homework." Fujio was too embarrassed to say that she couldn't bear to listen in physics class, so she was writing some code. But it didn't matter. To her, writing code was work. Fujio took the cake in her hands with a clear conscience. But there was something strange. Why did Movie Queen and have photos of her in class? Seeing the youngster scratching his head, Chin Mo knew that he wasn't doing homework at that time. He undid his tie slowly. "My mom is a fan of yours. She has been praising you since this morning, saying that you study hard and are serious in class." As a wall-jumping scholar, Lord Jiu shouldn't disappoint my mom. Finish your homework later. Fu Jiu, the Almighty's trick was really unexpected and shameless. He knew that she didn't like to do homework, but he still tricked her. But fortunately, Movie Queen and was gentle and kind. The kid is already out of school. Why do you want him to do homework? More. I asked Auntie Zhang to make soup for you. What do you like to eat? Auntie Zhang will make it for you tonight. Fu Jiu chuckled. I can eat anything. I'm not picky. Movie Queen and was so nice, totally different from the Almighty. It seemed that even though they were mother and son, there were still changes in their genes. But if it had been in the past, she would have rejected the suggestion of doing homework and followed Movie Queen Anne's instructions. But this time was different. This time she needed some time to do something. So Fu Jiu turned her head and said, I still have to do my homework, and I have to hand it in tomorrow. I'll do it myself first, and if I don't, I'll ask Brother Mo. When Movie Queen Anne heard this, she instantly felt that her Jiu was working too hard. She couldn't even eat cake in peace and had to do homework. Qin Mo, on the other hand, raised his eyebrows. His hand that was holding the teacup returned to its original position. Then he stood up and said faintly, Follow me to the study to write. Good. Fu Jiu picked up her bag and walked forward with Qin Mo. When he pushed the door open, he casually asked, I noticed that you really like studying today. Fu Jiu curled up her lips. I just want to leave a good impression in front of Movie Queen Anne. After all, she is Brother Mo's friend. Really? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster again. Chapter 5:33. Qin Mo threw the key on the wooden table and looked back. Do you believe what you just said? Don't you have homework to do? Come here. Fu Jiu curled her thin lips. She realized that the Almighty still treated her like a little brother. That kiss yesterday was probably nothing. Otherwise, the Almighty wouldn't continue to indulge her like this. Don't touch anything. Qin Mo pointed at the documents on the side, turned sideways, and put the ringing phone to his ear. Hello, the project in Dongqing. Fu Jiu couldn't hear the conversation. But it should be about work. This call was very timely for her. 5 minutes. Establish a virtual IP database. Through the periphery, directly lock onto the target. Such a plan would be faster than using hundreds of computers in the internet cafe. However, there was one thing that needed to be covered by a good firewall. This was also why Fu Jiu chose to act in the military compound. Because there must be some network defense measures here that other places didn't have. In that instant, only the sound of typing could be heard in the silent study. Fu Jiu sat on the wooden chair, her silver hair falling down. Her fingertips danced without any intention of stopping. The more cautious a person was, the more likely they would install some antivirus software on their computer. Although these antivirus software took some time to crack. But it wasn't too much trouble. Fu Jiu looked sideways, sucked on a lollipop, and then said softly, 1, 2. When she counted to 3, the screen immediately showed the other party's screen. It wasn't a big deal to use antivirus software to operate remotely. But after finding what she wanted, she had to leave quickly and clear the records. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes at this time. It was obvious that she was fighting for time. But analyzing the data also required the code to automatically analyze the progress bar. It wasn't safe here. If it wasn't for getting information faster, she wouldn't have chosen to act here. Fu Jiu watched the progress bar on the screen while guarding against the Almighty coming in. At the same time, she had to pay attention to the time. If she didn't leave quickly within the specified time, there would be traces left. Z never left traces when she did things. 95, 96, 97, 100. The progress bar was finally completed. But at this moment, the door of the study was suddenly pushed open. Fu Jiu's back paused, but her fingers didn't stop. She didn't make a sound, but pressed the enter key with one hand while looking up with a faint smile. Fortunately, it was Movie Queen Anne. But even if it was Movie Queen, she couldn't let her know what she was doing. Fu Jiu turned her finger and activated the self-destruct virus. A self-destructing virus was like that. Not only would the computer she had hacked into be infected, But her own computer would also be infected. Even if it was investigated in the future, he wouldn't use her as a source of attack either. However, it was obvious that the self-destruct virus needed time to run. So, after Fujio pressed the Alt key, she stood up naturally. "Auntie." Movie Queen and chuckled and took a step forward. "Which subject are you working on?" "I'll play hero with Auntie." These two sentences were spoken almost at the same time. Movie Queen and stopped in her tracks. "Sure, but don't play in the study, the atmosphere isn't right. Go to the living room and do your homework later." "Okay." When Fujio finished saying this word. Chapter 5:34. The self-destruct sequence was activated successfully. At the same time, in the staff office of number 1 middle school, Teacher Yang, who was chatting with someone on his computer, didn't know what was wrong with his laptop. At first, no matter how he typed, it didn't work. A dialog box was built on the interface, and there were things he couldn't understand on it. He couldn't even press the button to restart it. It felt as if his computer was being controlled by someone. Then the screen in front of him turned blue. It didn't work no matter how he slapped the laptop. He couldn't help but curse, "What a crappy computer." And all the information on the other party's computer was copied into the USB drive that Fujio inserted into the laptop. In the Chin family study, Fujio put her hands behind her back, wanting to remove the USB drive. Movie Queen and said again, "In the movies we often act in, the important scenes always happen in the study. Seems like it's not without reason." Fujio's fingers paused. Movie Queen and looked at the youngster's figure and chuckled. "All right, even if you weren't playing games just now and were typing, I wouldn't tell him. He's a cold person, and he thinks everyone is stupid. The Chin family is all like that, a tyrant in science and technology that no one likes. If you get a question wrong, he'll even raise his eyebrows and say, 'I didn't expect you to get such a simple question wrong.' The Almighty is like that." Fujio quickly removed the USB drive and put it in her palm. She chuckled. "I'll have to trouble Auntie and to keep it a secret for me." Just as she finished her sentence, Auntie Zhang walked in and said to Movie Queen and, "Madam, Miss Wu is here." "Zhen? Why is she here at this hour?" Movie Queen and was still puzzled. Fujio closed the fake notebook with her hands behind her back. This could be considered as doing it without anyone knowing. But Movie Queen and was smart, and she quickly guessed that Fujio was typing. It seemed like she was destined to waste a laptop. But it didn't matter. Her ultimate goal was to get the teacher's information. In the living room, Chin Mo had already hung up. He had one hand in his trouser pocket, and he just stood there with an indifferent expression. The person standing opposite him was none other than Wu Zhen. Fujio raised her eyebrows when she saw that face. The other party might not know her, but she still remembered him. This was the one who made her give up the chance to dance at the masquerade ball. But today, Wu Zhen wasn't wearing a military uniform, but a police uniform with a badge on her shoulder. Ordinary people wouldn't dress like this during normal times. So, at first glance, Fujio guessed the other party's identity. The police. In her previous life, it was the profession she had dealt with the most. He was also the type of person that she would always try to avoid. Wu Zhen didn't expect anyone else to be in the Chin house. She was about to say something, but after seeing Fujio, she suddenly paused and smiled. "Auntie, and this is?" "Jio, Tao-er's best friend." Movie Queen and lifted the corners of her lips. "Look at your shocked expression. Isn't the Chin family sending anyone over?" Wu Zhen was quick to admit it. "I really didn't expect Brother Mo to bring someone over." "Jio is different," Movie Queen and said happily, her posture elegant. Wu Zhen had never seen her auntie and like anyone so much. Even she hadn't received such an evaluation. Chapter 5:35. Wu Zhen glanced at Fujio again. Her first impression was that the youngster's skin was too fair, especially his peach blossom eyes. They were so distinct that she seemed to have seen them somewhere before. But Wu Zhen was sure she had never seen this person before. If she had, it was impossible not to have any impression of him. After all, He was indeed too outstanding. Qin Emo also noticed Wu Zhen's gaze. He leaned over casually, unknowingly blocking the youngster's face. His voice was indifferent. "Are you done with your homework?" This question was directed at Fujio. Fujio curved her thin lips. Of course. From a certain perspective, her homework was indeed done. Wu Zhen didn't expect that person to actually care about whether someone did their homework or not. In fact, Wu Zhen wasn't that old. But she always wanted the best, whether it was her grades or her boyfriend. So after she locked on to her target, she knew her occupation. Plus, she had a family, so entering the police station wasn't that difficult. At that time, Brother Mo had never asked her if she had done her homework. Wu Zhen raised her eyebrows, suddenly remembering where she had seen this youngster. The photo on the official Weibo. The photo of the two of them. One of them was him. That photo had been reposted many times, saying that they were an official CP. Wu Zhen still remembered that when she first saw the news, she had commented that it was nonsense. She didn't think that anyone was special to Brother Mo. Today, when she saw the youngster, she realized that it was hard to say whether he was special or not. But to be able to enter the Qin family, he must have a good relationship. What kind of CP was that? It was a little ridiculous. Those people were too imaginative. They probably didn't even realize it. Those who were matched like that, whether they were willing or not. But there was another possibility. She suspected that it was the youngster's motive for getting close to Brother Mo. But it was still too early to say that. She wasn't familiar with the esports industry and wasn't one of them. Similarly, Brother Mo shouldn't be one of them. So, she came here to help him get back on track. Brother Mo, the police need you now. Wu Zhen continued with the previous topic, but this time, she lowered her voice so that no one else besides Qin Mo could hear. Movie Queen and could tell that they had something to discuss. He brought Fujio to the sofa on the other side. Come, Jio, let them talk. Let's play hero. Fujio's mind wasn't on the game. She could tell that the two of them wanted to go to the study. Although the notebook in the study was broken, it was still placed on the wooden table. If this policewoman saw it? Fujio's hands paused, and she didn't react immediately. Because if she were to react at this time, it would only make her look weirder. When she entered the study room, the Almighty had told her not to touch anything. In that case, the other party probably wouldn't be able to find out about her notebook. Fujio calmed herself down and started moving her fingers. On the surface, she seemed to be playing games with Movie Queen but in fact, her left ear had never left the source of sound. Wu Zhen looked at Qin Mo, unwavering. That handsome face was still as elegant as ever. She wasn't sure if she wanted Brother Mo back to solve the case or if she just wanted to be with him. No matter what the reason was. Chapter 5:36. 2 days ago, Captain Huang received a very important case. This kind of case is rare in the country. Before every case, the other party would leave a notice for the netizens. Leave a notice in advance? When Qin Mo heard this, he looked up with his deep eyes. However, Wu Zhen didn't know that the youngster who was playing games on the other side paused at the same time. Wu Zhen only looked at Qin Mo's face. A month ago, this person started his first operation. He revealed a person's crime on the internet. Immediately after, that person fell from the roof in the early morning of the same day. The police judged it as a suicide because there wasn't enough evidence. Not only that, the IP that left the notice was also a fake IP, so no one could find his exact location. But this isn't the main point. The most important thing is this photo. As Wu Zhen spoke, she passed the photo to Qin Mo. There's only one sentence written on it. "I'm back, signed by Z." At that moment, no one knew. After hearing that sentence, the youngster narrowed his eyes in reaction. Fujio even forgot to swipe the game character on the screen. "I'm back, signed by Z?" She knew better than anyone that these words weren't written by Z. Because she was Z. A month ago, she was still busy dealing with the Fu family's matters. How could she be working on a case? But here came the problem. Who was it that was pretending to be her? It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a fake. First of all, the crime was basically the same as hers. Secondly, this message. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Was this person trying to cause trouble? Movie queen and screamed in a low voice. Gio, why didn't you go back to the tower? You were standing outside and getting beaten until you died. That sentence. Not only did it bring Fujio back to her senses, it also made Chin Emo look over. Immediately after, Chin Emo walked over and lowered his eyes to look at the youngster's phone screen. His voice was very calm and even a little careless. What were you thinking about just now? With this guy's hand speed, how could he die in an ordinary 5v5? He had never died even once in the professional league. Fujio knew that if she didn't find a reason, she would be suspected. She stood up and tilted her head. Her thin lips moved closer to Chinmo's left ear, speaking mysteriously, "Brother Mo, did your police friend recognize me from last night?" When the youth's pleasant scent wafted over, it came from such a sensitive place. Chinmo's eyes dimmed. He exerted some force with his fingers and straightened the guy's body. He arched a brow. "Are you worried about that?" "Well, everyone has to worry." Fujio smiled faintly. "I didn't expect such a beautiful person to be a police officer." It wasn't clear if it was intentional, but Chin Emo leaned over, his voice deep. "You seem to be against the police." "I do feel conflicted." Fujio would definitely tell the truth about this. After all, the Almighty had already seen through it. If she continued to hide it, it would make her look like she was up to something. Chin Emo glanced at the youngster, straightened his back, and stuffed his hands into his pockets. "Don't worry, she won't know it was you last night." "That's good." Fujio blinked. "Then you guys continue being intimate. I'll focus on playing hero with Auntie." Chapter 537. Continue making out? Chinemo really wanted to ask this guy, which eye of his saw him making out with someone else. Chinemo was never one to mistreat himself. Since he was unhappy, he directly pulled the youngster's collar back. "Let's stop the game, let's talk about physics." It had been a long time since Fujio experienced being carried around like a sack. It seemed like the Almighty was angered by her again. Auntie Zhang watched from the side and was anxious. "Young master." Movie queen and was very relaxed. "Auntie Zhang, don't bother about them. Only close friends would do that." Wu Jin also laughed. But in fact, she wasn't happy. She originally thought that as long as she told Big Brother Mo about Z, he would focus all his attention on her. How did it turn out like this? Wu Jin lifted her eyes and looked at the two figures who were very close to each other. Since when was there anything more important than solving a case in Big Brother Mo's eyes? But even so, after hearing the name Z, Big Brother Mo's reaction was very obvious, and he didn't reject her suggestion. Now that there were guests at home, it wasn't practical to talk about this in detail. Wu Zhen believed that that person would return to the crime squad. It was just a matter of time on the other side. Chin Emo didn't bring Fujio to the study, but to the bedroom. With a click, he locked the door. He threw the person onto the bed and put his arm beside the youngster's ear. Even his breath was dangerous, and his fingers pinched Fujio's chin heavily. "This is called making out. Do you understand?" Fujio felt that with this position, she was on the bottom and the Almighty was on top. When he spoke, even his breath could hit her lips. It was really not suitable for an attack, so she retreated in order to advance. "Understood." But Chin Emo didn't get up immediately. His gaze seemed to move to those lips. Fujio once again realized that the distance between them was too close. Even at this moment, she was still a boy. The Almighty suddenly opened his mouth and interrupted her thoughts. "Not done yet?" Before Fujio could speak, she felt a slight coldness on her lips. When another person's fingertips touched his own lips, the feeling was completely different. Fujio only felt the fingertip move out of her lips, which made her feel a little unnatural. She turned her head away and wiped it with the back of her hand. Chin Mo watched the youngster's movements. He pushed himself up from the bed. "Wait for me here. If you say anything more, I'll bite your mouth open and you won't be able to recover for a month." Chin Mo looked at the youngster. At first, Fujio didn't understand the hidden meaning behind it. She raised her eyebrows, looking very cool and rebellious. Until the Almighty left. Only then did she understand. She opened her mouth and pulled the quilt over. She was inexplicably taken advantage of by the Almighty. But who exactly was impersonating her? Fujio's eyes darkened. Through today's incident, she could finally confirm the Almighty's identity. Psychiatrists and criminologists are secondary. Most importantly, he should have assisted the police more than once. Fujio even had a feeling that the Almighty was very likely to be in the key case investigation unit in China, and that he was the main investigator of a major case. Chapter 538. Before Fujio was reborn in this body. She had heard about the key case investigation unit on Fifth Avenue. It was said that they solved cases very quickly. No matter how old the case was, they would find the culprit within 10 days once they got their hands on it. And some bad guys who wanted to escape from the law would be sent to prison with fatal evidence even if they used their connections. This was the legend of the key case investigation unit. But this was not the whole story. In this legend, the most important point was that there was one person in the key case investigation unit. He didn't hold any position, but only assisted. So no one knew what his identity was. However, all the cases were solved in such a short period of time, and the real culprit was quickly caught because of this person. Fujio remembered now. Everything seemed to be describing the Almighty. 3 years ago, the Almighty was still a high school student. At that time, he would have become a legend. Then the current him, just how powerful had he become? Judging from the Almighty's attitude, he seemed to have a stubborn attitude towards cases related to her. Fujio wasn't sure if Qin Mo would accept the female police officer's proposal to work with them. But she had seen the Almighty's ability to catch people. It was really tricky. Even she wasn't sure if she could cover up the Almighty's meticulous logical analysis with a disguise. Fujio raised her eyes and looked at the dark sky outside. There were some people you really didn't want to be enemies with. But Fujio understood. Her actions were undoubtedly challenging the authority of some people. That was why they wanted to catch her. But the Almighty wasn't like that. The Almighty only wanted the truth. Fujio was clear that if she continued like this, Chinamo would find out sooner or later. But she couldn't wait for this case. She had to admit that she didn't know the purpose of the imposter. But this kind of behavior was starting to make her movements unsafe. After Fujio heard the news, only 2 words appeared in her mind: they're not friendly. But she didn't have time to care about that now. The most important thing right now was the information in the USB. If she wanted that scumbag to get the punishment he deserved, she had to find something from the information. And this operation couldn't be like last time, where she needed to cover up. Otherwise, she would be targeted by the Almighty. Fujio laid on the bed for 5 minutes. She closed her eyes quietly and opened them again. She thought about the process, but Qin Mo didn't come up. She decided not to lie down anymore. She pushed the door open and went downstairs. That female officer didn't leave. Instead, she sat on the sofa and asked Movie Queen and about her. So that Fujio is the young master of the Fu family. I really couldn't tell, but he's quite polite, unlike the rumors. But he seemed to be on good terms with Brother Mo. How did they know each other? Movie Queen and placed her phone down and chuckled. Zhen, when did you become interested in such things? Wu Zhen paused and smiled. It's rare to see someone so close to Brother Mo. I'm really happy for Brother Mo, so I want to know what kind of person Fujio is. Chapter 539. Wu Zhen didn't know what to say. She thought that Auntie Anne would know something, but she didn't expect it to be like this. She knew that it wasn't appropriate for her to continue asking. After all, Auntie Anne wouldn't like her to know so much about someone she had never met. So Wu Zhen didn't ask anymore and smiled. Auntie Anne is right. It's important to be nice when interacting with people. After Fujio heard this, she raised her eyebrows. It seemed that this policewoman wasn't stupid. But even so, her intention of asking about her was obvious. Logically speaking, since she didn't recognize her from the ball last night, she shouldn't be so interested in her affairs, unless there was something else. Fujio didn't like anyone to ask about her no matter what. She had to be on guard against this policewoman because the more mysterious she was, the more unstable she would be, not to mention that she was a policewoman. Fu Jiu didn't walk up at this thought. Instead, she stood at the top of the stairs and began to look for the Almighty. Auntie Zhang saw Fu Jiu coming down with a plate of fruits in her hands. She said happily, "Young Master Jiu is here too. Come have some fruits. These are Madam's favorites." "Thank you, Auntie Zhang." Fu Jiu put a slice of orange in her mouth. She looked at the people who were still chatting and asked softly, "Auntie Zhang, where's Brother Mo?" "Young Master." Auntie Zhang looked back and forth. "Young Master asked Madam for something just now." "Now? He's probably in the study, getting his books." "Study?" Fu Jiu's fingers paused, and she immediately walked in the direction of the study. Her steps weren't hurried, but they were very fast. If the Almighty saw that she had brought a notebook, he would definitely suspect something. Fu Jiu hoped that she could make it in time. She pushed open the study's wooden door and saw Qin Mo sitting at the table. His face was as handsome as ever, but there was something in his hand. It was none other than her disguised notebook. The sound of the door opening made Qin Mo lift his lids. He glanced over faintly. Fu Jiu didn't know what he knew from that glance. But she never left any traces behind. Even though she was interrupted by Movie Queen, and she still activated the computer's self-destruct program. This meant that the Almighty couldn't come to the computer and discover the secrets inside. But even so, it would be great if the Almighty didn't notice that she was using the laptop, but it was obvious that not only did the Almighty notice it, but he also used his fingers to pick up one end of the notebook. His voice was indifferent. "What do you usually bring this to class for?" Fu Jiu chuckled. "I play games, do some research, and sometimes browse the hacker forum." Everything Fu Jiu said was true, but there was one thing she didn't mention. That was why she brought her laptop to class. She needed to attack the network at any time. Qin Mo retracted his hand and looked at the youngster standing at the door. His gaze was deep. "I haven't asked you, but when did you realize you had the ability to be a hacker?" Chapter 540. Even though the Almighty didn't know much about the owner of this body, he still had some contact with her. He probably felt that something was different, so he probed her with everything he asked in the beginning, and he was very strict with her. Fu Jiu understood all of this. So it was unrealistic to say that she had the hacking ability recently. But if she said that she had it before, then she needed to tell a story. Fu Jiu put her hands in her pockets and walked closer. "It was probably when I was in junior high, when my mom was just kicked out of the company. That triple success made my dad never come home again. Everyone knew that my mom's real power had been taken away, and I wasn't sure if I would still be the young master of the Fu family. At that time, I saw a post on an internet cafe forum about teaching others how to crack virus software. It wasn't very complicated, but even I didn't expect it to be so easy. I just tried to crack all the antivirus software in the internet cafe at that time. Later on, I became interested in this field, and after I learned about the use of the internet, I wanted to use it to deal with that family and help my mom get the company back. I was young at that time, so I wasn't allowed to enter big internet cafes, except for some small ones. Later on, I learned that I would be arrested by the police for doing these things, so I went to nightclubs more often and appeared in front of everyone with a different image. It was actually a kind of protection for myself, and that's why I was so against that female police officer just now." There was indeed no mistake in the timing. Qin Mo had asked someone to look up some information on the young man. Because at that time, he had doubted the young man's hacking skills. In junior high school, however, a change had occurred in the young man. It seemed that from that time on, this person became more and more infatuated and decadent. Fu Jiu paused. "Actually, I entered this line of work because I really admired someone at that time. That person was the hacker who published the post about cracking virus software. Her code name was Z." Qin Mo interrupted Fu Jiu, stood up from the chair, and looked at the young man with a meaningful look in his eyes. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. "Brother Mo, how did you know?" "The game name is Spade Z, so it's not hard to guess." Qin Mo didn't tell the young man that it was all because of the other party's skills. Fujio smiled faintly. Just think of it as my chunibyu. But that person didn't post any technical posts, and I only learned a little bit. I heard many people in the industry say that this person is different from others. She doesn't like to show up unless there's a case. She seems to have helped the police solve a lot of cases, but the police are still trying to catch her. It's quite strange. Brother Imo, why do you think the police are always after her? Chinamo looked at the youngster, his eyes dark. When he spoke in a low voice, it sounded like he was reciting a poem. Because those who fight with the evil dragon will eventually become the evil dragon themselves. When you stare into the abyss stares back at you. Chapter 541. I'm not a philosopher and I'm not Z, so I don't know what she will do when the time comes. Chinamo glanced at the youngster. All right, it's not suitable for people in their rebellious phase to talk about this. Come here. Fujio once again felt that her identity as a high school student was despised by the Almighty. Even the topic depended on age? Also, when would the topic about her rebellious phase end? Fujio didn't move. To be honest, she really wanted to know why the Almighty was so relentless in his pursuit of her. Did he think she was a bad person? Seeing that the youngster didn't come over, Chin-mo frowned and lifted the youngster's chin with his fingers. What? Fujio took a step back. Chin-mo pulled her back directly. Stay there, don't move. Fujio finally saw what the Almighty was holding in his hand. It was a light-colored lip balm. Wait, Brother Mo, you have something like this? She thought that a straight man like the Almighty wouldn't be like some gay men, who not only kept their skin hydrated, but also their thin lips moist. That was why he had more skincare products than girls, and he was very particular about the brand. I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person, Brother. Chinamo raised his eyebrows and said casually, Stop your messy thoughts. This lip balm belongs to your top fan, Ms. Movie Queen Anne's. Fujio tilted her head and rejected in a manly manner. No need, it's too girly. Chin-mo pinched her chin again. It's colorless. Now you feel girly. Why don't you feel girly when I ask you to work out? I have abdominal muscles too. Fujio pretended to lift her clothes. But this time, the Almighty didn't stop her from acting like a hooligan. Instead, he stood there with a faint smile on his face, as if he would allow her to lift him up. Fujio couldn't really lift her clothes, so she gave up. She raised her head and said in a cool voice, Don't put too much on. If I put too much on, that female officer will recognize me. It will be embarrassing. Kids in their rebellious phase usually care a lot about their faces. Chin-mo lowered his eyes slightly, and his fingers touched the beautifully shaped thin lips in front of him. Fujio once again felt the slight coldness. When the fingertips brushed across her lips, it brought about an itch. It wasn't obvious, but it felt like a feather hitting her. As soon as she opened her eyes, she could see the Almighty's pleasing face, tall nose bridge, deep eyes, and handsome features. She had to admit that he was very charming. Brother Imo, are you of foreign descent? Chin-mo replied faintly. My grandfather is an overseas Chinese studying in England. No wonder. Mixed bloods were usually handsome. Chin-mo lowered his waist further. Raise your chin higher and open your mouth. They were very close to each other. It was because it was too close. That was why he felt that this posture was a little too ambiguous. In addition, when the familiar scent of tobacco hit his lips, Fujio finally couldn't help but say, Brother Mo, I can actually apply lip balm on my own. The color will be lighter. Chin-mo didn't care about the youngster's opinion at all. He started to brush from the center of his lips. Don't worry about the color and don't think about the police. With me around, no one will be able to catch you. Fujio wanted to say that this wasn't the problem, but didn't the Almighty feel that they were too close? Chapter 542. She thought of the word kiss. Fujio wanted to move away subconsciously. She didn't know if the Almighty had seen through her. At this moment, Chin-mo said calmly, I investigated Z. Fujio tried her best to look surprised. You've investigated Z? Qin Mo knocked the youngster's head. Listen to me, don't move, it's not good. Fujio. Are all younger brothers so pitiful nowadays? Her real body is in America. Qin Mo didn't tell her what happened that time. Instead, he rubbed the youngster's lips, and his eyes were heavy. If you want to know why I wanted to investigate her, it's probably because I finally found such an opponent, so I wanted to take a look. Fujio. You really can't look at the Almighty like a normal person. Her operation is not bad, and her way of doing things is very interesting. But at that time, it seemed to be out of control. Qin Mo's tone was calm. Because of this, she needed someone to tell her not to go astray. Fujio didn't expect to hear such an answer. Don't go astray? It would be a pity for such an opponent to turn into an evil dragon. It was just a careless ending. It made Fujio stop in her tracks. So, the Almighty appeared in the Fifth Avenue to save her? In this world, there was probably no one who knew your situation better than your opponent. So, it was an opponent? Fujio couldn't help but chuckle. From a long, long time ago. She used to say that the Almighty was the most righteous person she had ever met. His values were even more perfect than his looks. He was righteous, and no evil could invade him. He was a police officer, but his way of thinking was different from the police. He was never a stickler for rules, but he was born to be responsible. Many foreigners liked to use the Great Wall to describe the greatness of China. But Fujio felt that it wasn't the Great Wall that truly defended against foreign invasions. It was the soldiers stationed at the border. It was the Almighty. All she could see was this kind of beauty. That kind of majestic tenacity was enviable. If you keep looking at me like that, I will think that you want me to kiss you. Qin Mo grabbed the youngster's collar and suddenly lowered his whole body. His thin lips were just a few centimeters away from Fujio's, and his eyes were dark and deep. It was only then that Fujio recalled their unpleasant kiss. She took a very serious stance and said, I was just distracted by Brother Mo's handsomeness. I definitely had no intention of taking advantage of you. Qin Mo looked at the almost transparent face in front of him, his breath slipping past the youngster's ear. Is that so? Brother Mo, you have to believe me. Fujio felt that the Almighty was much more dangerous than before. Her ears were itchy, and she couldn't help but rub them. I would have told you in advance even if I wanted to take advantage of you. Qin Mo retracted his hand when he saw the youngster's expression. He knew that when dealing with someone, some things couldn't be too obvious. Moreover, ever since he came back that day, he had read books on this subject. If you want to turn a person gay, you have to do it slowly. The young man probably had no intention of taking advantage of him. However, he was constantly thinking about making this person his. When he rubbed those pale lips just now, he even wanted to kiss them without caring about anything else. Chapter 543. No matter how smart Fujio was, she couldn't guess what Qin Mo was thinking. What's more, that man exuded an aura of abstinence and nobility. To others, it didn't look like Qin Mo was going to kiss Fujio, but Fujio was flirting with Almighty Qin. In terms of looks, Fujio looked like a demon. However, she wasn't sure if the Almighty believed what she said, so she had to be more careful in the future. However, Qin Mo didn't tell the youngster. He was sure that the laptop had been used. The laptop's base was warm, which meant that it had been used not long ago. It was obvious who had used it. But now the laptop couldn't be turned on. What kind of situation did a hacker encounter to make his laptop unable to be turned on? Qin Mo looked up and glanced at the youngster's tall and straight back view. This guy, what was he trying to hide? He definitely wouldn't stay in the study for long. Not to mention Movie Queen, and Wu Zhen was also there. She was still chatting with Movie Queen and was hospitable and invited her for dinner. Wu Zhen didn't reject. In fact, she came at this time because she wanted to spend more time with that person. But this time, she didn't expect that there would be a youngster at the table. The atmosphere was completely different from before. Qin Mo sat on Fujio's right. He was wearing a pure white sweater, and his black hair hung down. He was full of abstinence, but there was an undetectable gentleness in his eyes. This was something Wu Zhen had never seen before. Movie Queen and sat opposite Fujio. Ever since the dishes were served, her chopsticks hadn't stopped moving. "Gio, try this. Beijing pork bun. It's delicious." "Okay." Fujio was indeed the type to eat whatever she was given. Her handsome face was stuffed round, and when she raised her head, she looked like a squirrel. It was rare to see such a handsome squirrel. Chin Mo's lips curled up. He thought that feeding the youngster was a good entertainment. Fujio always felt that the food on her plate couldn't be finished. Forget about Movie Queen and why did the Almighty join in the fun? Once the food on her plate was finished, he would immediately fill it up for her. Was he treating her like a pig? Wu Zhen's hand that was holding the bamboo chopsticks froze. Then she laughed. "The National League is in a few days, right? Seeing you like this, those fans will definitely have a nosebleed again. To them, your existence is a blessing." Movie Queen and was delighted. They are indeed a good match, they are both so handsome. After the National League, I will definitely poach Gio over to be my partner for a month. Then I will tell everyone that he is my godson. Fujio, she had never known that Movie Queen and enjoyed showing off her godson. "Auntie, you might as well poach the Almighty. Girls like him are more likely to like him." Movie Queen and lowered her voice. "I tried before, but it didn't work, Mom." Chin Mo interrupted Movie Queen and, "The next time you poach someone, don't do it in front of me, the captain. Otherwise, I can only forbid my teammates from interacting with you, including playing games with you online." Movie Queen and glanced at her son, preparing to call her husband to complain. Chapter 544. That's right. When Chin Mo agreed to let Fujio come to the Chin family, his intentions weren't simple. It wasn't that he didn't want to let go. Because even he himself couldn't believe that he would have those uncontrollable thoughts about a boy who was worse than him. If the youngster knew about his thoughts, what would the result be? At that moment, Chin Mo felt like his heart had stopped beating. But Chin Mo knew very well that from their interactions these days, he wasn't gay. Because he was a hacker, it was possible for him to hide his identity as a gay. Plus, the youngster's care and gentleness towards the girl made Chin Mo realize that if he didn't hold on to this person now, he would never be able to. No matter what, he didn't want to see that scene ever again. Especially after the masquerade party. This thought grew even stronger. Because he couldn't bear anyone else kissing the youngster. It didn't matter if the other party was a man or a woman. Since he couldn't bear to lose him, he would make him his. Chin Mo knew very well that it wasn't easy to turn a straight man gay. Because if any other man other than the youngster got close to him, he would feel disgusted. Not to mention doing intimate things in the future. It was probably related to Chin Mo's background. He was born with a predatory nature. So even if there was a chance, he wanted to turn this person gay. Fujio's mind wasn't on physics. It was on the USB in her pocket. There wasn't much time left, but she couldn't go back immediately. If she left just like that, then what she did in the study would be too obvious. She had to wait until this was over. Fujio's thoughts were indeed more focused than before. Because the best police force in the country was in Jiang City. If the Almighty was the legend of the crime squad, that meant that the crime squad was also in Jiang City. And according to her understanding of the police, when they weren't sure of the target, they would usually search the sea and find a hacker with similar techniques. To avoid being discovered, she had to hide well before taking action. As for how she would do it, it depended on whether the Almighty would return to the crime squad. No matter how much you stare, you can't write the answer to this question if you don't move your pen. A familiar male voice came into her ears. Fujio looked over and said simply, "It's too difficult. I'll explain it again." Chin Mo was originally standing, but at this moment his arm went around Fujio's back, and his fingertips touched the exercise book. It was as if he was hugging the young man from behind, and the scene was incomparably beautiful. Using Formula 2 here, the night outside the window darkened little by little, and it was impossible to see people's shadows clearly, because fog lingered everywhere. Wu Zhen held a cup of tea in the living room until the tea in her palms turned cold. She clenched her fists and stood up, smiling faintly at Movie Queen and Since Brother Mo is so busy, I won't be staying any longer. Antian, you should rest early too. I still have to work when I get back. There have been too many cases recently, so please tell Brother Mo to consider my words. Antian, I believe you wish for Brother Mo to return to the crime squad. After all, this is the only way to resolve the knot in his heart. Movie Queen and didn't speak at first, but in the end she said faintly, let's see what he thinks. As long as he continues being like this, it doesn't matter if he doesn't feel happy, it all depends on whether he's willing or not. I understand. Wu Jin put on her police cap, but the smile on her face didn't disappear. Even if Brother Mo didn't return. The next time Z made a move. Chapter 545. Why can't you just apply one formula to another? Why do you have to apply this to this and that to that? Fu Jiu liked to hold her pen in her mouth ever since she started studying physics. She was very talkative, completely different from her usual demure self. Qin Mo lowered his lids to look at the youngster's fluffy head. For some reason, he found the youngster, who was usually infuriating, rather cute. He resisted the urge to pull him into his arms and caress him. The corners of his mouth curved up without a trace. The two of them were very close to each other. Fu Jiu looked up and saw the almighty smile. She couldn't help but be stunned by his beauty, and then she shook her head. Qin Mo saw the young man's expression and raised his eyebrows. Why are you shaking your head? Brother Mo, you're always so handsome. Don't you feel any pressure? Fu Jiu didn't want to read those physics books that didn't suit her, so she found a topic to talk about. Qin Mo glanced at the young man. You're so good at physics, but you still feel no pressure. Fu Jiu. There was no way to continue the conversation. Want to rest? Qin Mo stood up straight, looking indifferent in his handsome face. Fu Jiu casually put her hands on the back of the chair. That posture was very handsome, and she admitted readily, it's a bit late today, why don't we continue tomorrow? Fu Jiu said this not because she was too tired, but because she needed to find a place to check out the information she had copied. Qin Mo's slender fingers tapped on his wrist to let the young man look at the time. It wasn't even 8 o'clock, so it wasn't late at all. Qin Mo turned his eyes and looked very noble. Going back so early, do you want to do something else? Shower and sleep, Fu Jiu answered seriously. Qin Mo's voice was very calm. I'll say it again, do you believe it yourself? The wall-climbing night owl is a top student. Fu Jiu. What the hell was with the night owl this time? Student Fu Jiu didn't want to move at all. The Almighty's critical strike was too strong. Get up. Qin Mo closed his physics book. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. What are you doing? Eating again? I can't eat anymore. Seems like your mind is only filled with eating and sleeping. The Almighty's tone was a little mocking. Fu Jiu's thin lips twitched. She had been stuffed with all kinds of food since the beginning, so it was normal for her to think in that direction. If you're too tired from studying, you can take a break. With that, he brought Fu Jiu to another room. Let's watch a movie. Hearing that, Fu Jiu looked around at the equipment around her. The projector and the big screen were all installed at home. That was why capitalists were so evil. Even watching a movie was so different. Qin Mo was already sitting in the middle, his long legs slightly crossed. Since it was nighttime, his eyes looked even deeper and more mesmerizing. There are films over there, you can choose anyone. Fu Jiu didn't understand. How did they end up coming to watch a movie? But according to the Almighty's personality, he should like some psychological or detective movies. It was a good opportunity to watch and learn. She picked a random film and pushed it in. Then, she sat next to the Almighty and supported her chin with one hand, preparing to watch it seriously. In the beginning, Fu Jiu didn't think much of it. After all, the plot was arranged well. When the people above had all come out. The more Fu Jiu watched, the more she felt that this film had nothing to do with being a detective. Chapter 546. Fu Jiu glanced at the screen and turned to look at the Almighty. The man's perfect side profile was hidden in the darkness. His dark eyes were very calm, as if the scene in front of him couldn't be any more normal. Was she thinking too much? Fu Jio tapped the side of her face with her fingers. She had just taken a sip of the tea when she was shocked by the next scene. Cough, cough. She couldn't be blamed for choking. They were enemies 1 second ago, and the next second, they were kissing. No one would have a strong ability to accept such things. Most importantly, it was those two blue kids. Two blue kids, American drama. Luckily, it was Fujio. If it were someone else, they would have stood up from the stimulation. Fujio glanced sideways at the Almighty who was sitting beside her. The Almighty's eyebrows were good-looking to begin with. When he frowned, the strong sense of abstinence intensified. Fujio hadn't opened her mouth yet. Chin Mo's voice came over casually. Are you trying to explain to me that you didn't choose this film on purpose? Fujio thought that of course she didn't do it on purpose, but why did the Almighty ask her in advance? It seemed like she did it on purpose. Over 100 films. Chin Mo didn't look at the youngster. Instead, he adjusted his sleeves and said slowly, "You're really good at choosing." Fujio. This feeling of not being able to explain herself was a little depressing. No, Brother Imo, you're a straight man. Why do you have this kind of film? Was there any justice in this world? Chin Imo lowered his eyes and took a sip of tea. He didn't seem surprised. Because the Chin group made this director. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even know what this film is. Which meant that he was supporting his own business. Fujio became even more depressed. She really wasn't suited for this kind of game of choosing these days. She really picked whatever she wanted. I'll press the pause button. Fujio always felt that after the kiss, there would be more intense scenes. She had to stop as soon as possible, in case the Almighty would say that she still wanted to sleep with him and chose this film on purpose for him to watch. That was why a dark history couldn't be washed clean. Why do you press the pause button? That pleasant, deep voice came from behind her. Guilty? To prove that she wasn't guilty, Fujio sat back down and said evilly, "No, keep watching." It turned out that stubbornness was always harming her. After the first kiss. After that, it was natural to kiss again. Fortunately, there weren't any extreme scenes. But even so, every time he saw them kissing on the screen, she couldn't help but take another sip of tea. Fujio. If Fujio were to look at Chin Mo at this moment, she would definitely see the smile on the Almighty's face. There were more than 100 films, and every one of them had a boy as the main character. The first thing Fu was at Jiao Fu Zhang of Zhang, was be at here at. Of course, choosing a movie was also very particular. One could not place too much emphasis on taste. Otherwise, not only would the other party not be able to accept it, but it would also cause the other party to hate it. Ching to be. Fu wasn't. In reality, just as Jiang Zhua had said, Chin Mo couldn't be gay and he would never be gay. Chapter 547. The movie went on for a long time. Fujio didn't know how the Almighty felt. Anyway, she was watching it very seriously. When the movie finally finished, the last scene was still fixed on the male lead's face. She could vaguely see the tear stains on it. This made Chin Mo frown. If possible, he wanted the youngster to see a good ending, not such a heavy movie. But Fujio thought it was good. It's hard for two people with different identities to be together. A policeman and a bandit, even if the bandit treated the policeman extremely well and even broke many principles for the other. But black was always black. If there was only one person left alive. I hope that person is you. This was the end of the movie. Fujio looked at the man who was quietly being shot. She looked at him holding a cross in his hand even at the end. She looked at him smiling slowly. His pale side profile was blurred by the light, but it was still handsome. Then the policeman was reminiscing. He had known that person since he was young. They got into trouble together, fought together, and smoked together. But they separated later on. Only then did he have a different life experience. But all these couldn't compete with the kiss that person fell on him while he was asleep. After all, it was still a romance movie. In real life, the bandit and the policeman didn't have much of a relationship. Fujio held her chin and looked languid. Brother Mo, I'm in a bad mood after watching the tragedy. I want to go home to wash up and sleep. You seem to want to go back as soon as possible today. Chin Mo threw a sentence over indifferently. At that moment, Fujio felt like she was playing hero and was stunned by a big move. Did the Almighty suspect her by saying this? At the moment, she couldn't be sure. She only smiled more mischievously. No, I just don't want to face the evil physics anymore. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Play some games and see your recent condition. Also, you probably haven't seen the Xiangnan team's video. Fujio really hadn't seen it. For the competition and to avoid suspicion, she followed Chin Mo to the game room. The electronic equipment in the Almighty's room was more complete than her temporary office. There were 3 computers and 1 laptop with a big screen hanging on it. When 2 people played games, the effect was needless to say perfect. Especially when it comes to Ben. Chin Mo could attack the monster while looking at the youngster. It was indeed getting late. However, he did not want this person to leave. That was why he would find such an excuse to keep them here again and again. However, this was not the most ideal situation. Ideally, he would be able to see this person the moment he opened his eyes, and this person would only belong to him. This was indeed not the feeling she had for her younger brother. Chin Mo tilted his head, his gaze sliding past the youngster's face, landing on the thin lips that hadn't fully recovered from the bite. His eyes darkened. However, he still had to let this fellow go back. Otherwise, he wasn't sure what he would do. After playing, Fujio was still watching Xiangnan's video. The more she watched, the more serious her expression became. She realized that there was a reason why everyone was paying so much attention to Xiangnan. Regardless of whether it was in terms of formation or mechanics, the other side could almost be called the style of a king. Not only was their damage top-notch, but they were also very good at positioning and ambushing. Chapter 548. This person's finger technique should be very beautiful. Fujio tapped the screen with her finger. Chin Mo took a look, replying slowly, "Is that so?" Fujio was smart. She immediately laughed and said, "Of course not as good as Brother Mo. This must be the natural enemy of Brother Mo that the media is talking about. It's just a game. What natural enemy?" Chin Mo lit a cigarette, his eyes dark. "But in order to get the national champion, we have to defeat Xiangnan. Hence, you should retract your thoughts and spend some time on training. If nothing goes wrong, our final opponent will be Xiangnan." Fujio nodded and remembered that person's in-game name. The word Xiao was very eye-catching. It was indeed eye-catching. She remembered that on the official Weibo, this person always reposted the Almighty's stuff. Could it be that these 2 people knew each other? At this thought, Fujio reached out her hand and put it on Chin Mo's shoulder. "Brother Mo, I have a feeling that their captain is up to no good. Otherwise, he wouldn't keep reposting your official Weibo account. Why don't you just use your charm to stun him, and I'll follow up from behind? Don't think everyone is gay just because you're gay." Chin Mo reached out his hand with a faint smile and patted the youngster's face. He enunciated each word clearly, "If you try to push me away again, I'll use my charm on you." Fujio. The Almighty was getting more and more dangerous. He didn't know if it was because of that kiss. He was always using this to threaten her. "I might not be there for the first 2 matches of the national competition." Chin Mo's voice was calm. "If I'm not on the field, you will be the captain and command the team, understand?" Fujio didn't expect the Almighty to suddenly say this. She frowned. "Why isn't he here? I have some personal matters to attend to." After Chin Mo finished speaking, he straightened up and avoided the youngster's lips. "It's getting late, I'll send you back." "All right." Fujio didn't ask anything. In fact, as soon as the Almighty said he was busy with his personal matters, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. Fujio could basically guess what the Almighty was busy with. "There's a case about the Major Crimes Unit." Fujio's eyes darkened. Even when Chin Mo called her again, she didn't make a sound. Chin Mo assumed the youngster was worried about the National League. He walked over and pressed his fingers on the youngster's head. "Don't worry, Nothing personal is more important than our competition. I didn't show up for the first 2 matches because I'm sure you can win without me. Everyone in the team needs the ability to fight alone. It's the same even without me, understand? Understood. Fujio smiled. This was the Almighty, always knowing what his goal was. However, even so, she had no choice but to be prepared, because one day she would have to face the Almighty. Whenever he thought of this, he would inevitably get distracted. He wasn't worried about being caught. He probably didn't want to see that person look at him with disappointment. So I have to be a good opponent for the Almighty, right? Since they were destined to be opponents, then they should fight openly. The Almighty probably liked this type of opponent. In fact, it was the same for Fujio. She had said before that if she hadn't been discovered too quickly, she would have died. She really wanted to know who was better, her or the Almighty. Now, did this mean that her words had come true? Fujio stuffed her hands in her pockets and looked at the tall and straight figure walking in front of her. No matter what, she was very lucky to have an opponent like the Almighty. He was strong but never bullied the weak. He was born rich but full of righteousness. Chapter 549. Even if he knew that continuing to take action meant that there was no turning back. After returning to the Fu family, the first thing Fujio did was to enter her temporary secret base. To prevent himself from being recognized, Fujio disguised herself this time. Rather than calling it a disguise, it was more accurate to say that she had reverted to her original appearance. Soon, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of the mirror. She was wearing a pure black windbreaker, white jeans, and knee-high military boots. It was as if she was exuding handsomeness from her very bones. She wore a black earring on her left ear. She had a beautiful face, thin lips, and waist-length chestnut-colored hair. She even wore contact lenses on her eyes. 10 past 10. At this hour, there were still a lot of people in the internet cafe. However, the location of the internet cafe was very important. He couldn't do it near his house, nor could he go to Uncle Yin's place. Uncertainty was the most troublesome part for the police when it came to locating her. Therefore, Fujio had always been very casual in her choice of location. It was the same this time. He opened his card bag with a swoosh. He was different from some rich people. Fujio's card bag contained all sorts of IDs and work permits. Every time he used his ID card, it would become invalid. This was to not leave any traces. Fujio's operation this time was the same. Boss, turn on a computer. Usually, at this time, the people who came would be playing all night. There weren't many people in the internet cafe. After all, it wasn't a Saturday or Sunday, and the students weren't on holiday yet. Some of them had skipped classes to form a team to play hero. Even the person sitting at the cashier counter didn't raise his head. Working overnight? If it's overnight, I'll drive right now. No, just an hour, Fujio said as she handed over the money. That person operated the mouse with one hand and passed the change to Fujio with the other. In other words, he didn't notice Fujio's appearance at this stage. The only thing that could capture images was the internet cafe's surveillance camera. But from such an angle, he could only capture Fujio's back. The first thing he did after turning on the computer, Fujio hacked the internet cafe's surveillance system and then checked the contents of the USB. It was very clean inside, and there was not even a bit of residue. But the more it was like this, the more troublesome it was. This proved that Teacher Yang was very vigilant. Even on the computer, there was nothing that could harm him. However, this was the school office computer, not the one at home. It seemed that if they wanted to find any evidence, they had to first confirm the teacher's home address. Fujio narrowed her eyes, and her fingers moved quickly on the keyboard. It wasn't difficult to hack into number 1 middle school's school network. All she had to do was find the other party's address, and she could continue to hack through the network cable. However, something even more troublesome happened. In the teacher's section of the school website, the teacher with the surname Yang did not fill in his specific home address. Fujio paused and quickly retreated. He glanced at the contents of the USB drive again. There was really nothing in it. But there was a QQ chat history that caught Fujio's attention. It was a conversation between Teacher Yang and an unknown person. First, the man asked, "How is it? Still not done?" The buyer has been waiting anxiously. Yang Ming, "In a few days. Don't worry, sooner or later, you will be able to taste something fresh." Fu Jiu looked at this sentence over and over again, feeling that there was something wrong. No teacher in any school would sell food as a part-time job. Chapter 550. It wasn't food that he was selling. If it wasn't food, it could only be a human. Fu Jiu clenched her fists, her gaze sinking. It was as dark as the night, turbulent and difficult to calm down. Things were more complicated than she had imagined. Moreover, she couldn't alert the enemy. What was the use of catching a worm? If she didn't uncover the identity of the buyer, this matter would never end. Fu Jiu used the QQ search function to search for the other party's QQ account. The information was sparse, only age and occupation. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes when she saw the occupation column. She sat there for a long time without moving. She had the urge to smoke. She didn't hide it, ordering a box of Marlboro from the bar counter before she left. Fu Jiu didn't smoke like Qin Mo. She had an indescribable aloofness. Especially when she stood in an empty alley, her aloofness would be especially obvious. So that's the case. Fu Jiu spoke with a puff of smoke. No wonder he was so arrogant. Seems like I have to take it slow. There was a high possibility that the case would be reversed due to the identity of the buyer. Hence, before there was any concrete evidence, the only thing she could do was to protect Li Mengran. How could she make everything seem natural? Fu Jiu quickly thought of an idea. However, before she could implement this method, a voice suddenly rang out. That Yang had taken the initiative to look for her. "Student Fu Jiu, come with me." At the entrance of Class D, his gaze swept across the room with a stern expression. If one didn't know his inner self, they probably wouldn't think of him as a pervert. But in this world, who didn't wear a layer of disguise to live their lives? Fu Jiu placed the tablet down, smiling faintly as she stood up. The other students' voices seemed to have stopped. No one knew why a teacher from Class A was looking for a student from Class D. Yang brought Fu Jiu into the office, pointing to the skateboard at the side. "This should be yours, right?" Fu Jiu glanced over, as though she was confirming. "It looks like mine, but mine has my name on it, it's not here." Yang narrowed his eyes. "Is that so? If you're interested, I can bring it to you. My skateboard is in the classroom." How could Fu Jiu be her skateboard? However, just as she expected, this young guy was very smart. He even used the skateboard to confirm whether the person who appeared in the corridor yesterday was her. If it was so easy to be discovered by the other party, she wouldn't have to be a hacker anymore. The student surnamed Yang looked at the student in front of him again. He knew a little about Fu Jiu. In reality, this sentence was nonsense. The person who used to be the biggest drag on the school had somehow become the most handsome guy in the school. It could be said that it caused a sensation in the entire school. He had also seen the interview with the youngster. He didn't know why, but from the bottom of his heart, he didn't want to have more contact with this young man. However, the appearance of this skateboard yesterday made him pay attention to it. Chapter 551. How could someone as smart as Fu Jiu not hear the threat in his words? However, it was clear that Teacher Yang had misunderstood her position. She hated being threatened the most. Teacher is right. It's better to be a simple student. When the youth said this, his voice was very slow. Yang Ming didn't know why, but he was always on guard against him. Obviously, the other party was just a high school student. So what if he was popular? When the time came, he would have the final say on the exam papers. Since it's not your board, go back. Also, help me ask who this thing belongs to. All right. Fu Jiu had never been one to reveal her own danger in front of such people. This was hacking. They would always move in the dark. The moment Li Mengran heard that the youngster had been called over by Yang Ming, she rushed to Class D. When she didn't see Fu Jiu, her eyes wavered. Shui Yaoyao saw that she was in a bad condition and reached out to hold her. "Mengran, what's wrong?" Your Highness Geo really went to Teacher Yang's office? Li Mingran's face was filled with unprecedented fear. Shui Yao Yao nodded. His hand was pulled away. Yao Yao, we must go to save him. Teacher Yang must have found out the person who appeared there yesterday is... Before Li Mengran could finish her sentence, the youth's light laughter came from behind her. Mengran, why are you here? Li Mengran turned around, heaving a sigh of relief when she saw that the person was fine. Noticing that many students were looking at her, she forced a smile. I'm here to look for Yao Yao. If you want to find me, then so be it. If you want to find me, don't use Yao Yao as an excuse. Fu Jiao stuffed one hand into her pocket, wearing her school jacket over her pure white shirt. She reached out and knocked Li Mengran's head, her actions so intimate that it seemed like she was doing it for everyone to see. Silly girl. Before Li Mengran could understand what was going on, the young man bent down and held her in his arms. His voice was soft. Are you ready to agree? Wah what? Li Mengran felt her ears going numb, her feet felt like they were stepping on cotton. The youngster's lips curled up into a smile, like the sunlight slanting out. Of course it's to be my girlfriend. Girlfriend. Instantly. The inside and outside of the classroom looked like it had been bombed by an atomic bomb. The girls covered their lips with their hands. The boys banged the wooden table loudly as if they were cheering for Fu Jiao. In short, girlfriend? His Highness Jiao was actually going to get a girlfriend. Moreover, His Highness Jiao had taken the initiative to pursue someone else. Oh no, they could not accept this cruel news. Many girls' hearts were about to break. The male students were very happy. Especially those from Class D, they knew that as long as Fu Jiao was around, they would never be able to stand out. In short, they had already lost all hope in this world that only cared about appearances and not strength. Think about it. When a guy without a girlfriend confesses to a girl, the girl he likes shyly tells him, "It's not that you're not good enough, it's just that I already have someone I like." Who is it? Who is that person? I want to know. I won't tell you. As the girl said so, she glanced at the silver-haired youth sitting behind her. Did she think he was an idiot? Chapter 552. There was also someone who had a girlfriend. Get out of the way. Don't block my way. Hero, why is this video so short? Forget it, since I, His Highness Jiao, am not here anymore, I'll go and play a round of hero myself. Just now, I, His Highness Jiao, should have played the assassin. I play the assassin too. In other words, not only did they have to fight against their girlfriend's Prince Charming, but they also had to fight against the game. What kind of world was this? Now that Fu Jiao had a girlfriend, it was a joyous occasion for the whole world to celebrate. They had to light whips to celebrate. Other than Li Mengran, Shui Yao Yao was the only one who felt different. Because Shui Yao Yao knew very well that His Highness Jiao's true identity wasn't suitable for him to find a girlfriend. Why would His Highness Jiao suddenly ask such a question at this time, and in front of everyone? What did His Highness Jiao want to do? Li Mengran widened her eyes, her pupils wavering. No, you, quickly agree. When Fu Jiao said this, she leaned forward, and her voice was so low that only the two of them could hear it. Li Mengran paused, then nodded. Fu Jiao laughed again. There was a hubbub of voices at the scene. Almost on the same day, the school's tieba exploded. Do you know? Do you understand? What? His Highness Jiao has a girlfriend. Don't lie to me, my Jiao rejected a gift from a girl yesterday. It's true, and it was His Highness Jiao who took the initiative to chase that girl. In front of the whole class, he asked that girl if she was willing. My beautiful dream is completely shattered. Am I the only one who thinks His Highness Jiao is too handsome? She actually confessed her love in front of the whole class. If I were that girl, I would definitely faint from happiness. Silently saying this doesn't seem like a big deal. After all, there are many people who have been confessed to by His Highness Jiao. Hearing this, everyone remembered that His Highness Jiao often confessed to others in the past. It was just that this kind of confession was not pleasing, always bringing trouble to others. However, things were different now. She was gentle, patient, and smiled when she asked others if they agreed. His side profile was so handsome that it could almost take one's breath away. When such a photo was posted on Tieba, it simply broke the browsing record of #1 middle school's Tieba. As one of the main characters, Lee Mengran didn't know what to do. She understood that the young man would not do this for no reason. It must be for her. Although Lee Mengran wasn't clear about the cause and effect, she had this intuition. She was worried that she would drag the youth into this. At that time, Lee Mengran lifted her head to look at her. Fu Jiu looked into her eyes and smiled lightly. After a round of jubilation, it was time for 2 people, oh no, it should be 3 people alone. Together with Shui Yao Yao, they went to the school library. In fact, there weren't many people in the school library. The space was huge and it was near the window. It was also very quiet. Of course, none of this was the reason why Fu Jiu was interested in this place. Most importantly, the location of the library and the floor-to-ceiling window in front of her allowed her to clearly see everyone's activities after they left the teacher's building. Fu Jiu didn't beat around the bush. She looked at the 2 girls in front of her and said, "I'm sorry. Everything happened so suddenly, so you have to pretend to be my girlfriend." "This, I understand." Lee Mengran didn't look too good these few days. "I'm afraid it will affect your popularity. I heard from Yao Yao that you have a lot of fans. If you suddenly announce that you have a girlfriend, will they turn to fans or haters?" "It won't affect me. You don't have to think too much. I'm not playing games for my popularity." Fu Jiu lowered her head as she spoke, as though she didn't care at all. Lee Mengran turned to Shui Yao Yao. Shui Yao Yao patted her back. "Listen to your Highness Jiu." At that moment, Lee Mengran was indescribably touched. She knew how troublesome her situation was and no one would be willing to interfere. For example, some teachers had seen Teacher Yang bring her into the office many times, but because he had connections, he would only help her once or twice. He didn't seem to have the intention to make things clear. And now, there was a person who, even if it would affect his own popularity, would still help her, even going so far as to go against her teacher. Lee Mengran couldn't describe the feeling in that instant. She suddenly realized that she wasn't alone. Behind her, there was still strength to support her. Be it the youngster or her good friend Yao Yao, who was looking at her with concern. "Take a look. Do you know the online friend who made a deal with Yang Ming?" Fu Jiu turned the phone, showing Lee Mengran the chat history. Lee Mengran shook her head, speaking with difficulty. "I don't know Teacher Yang well." With that, Fu Jiu decided to change her approach. "What's the address of the supplementary lessons you mentioned?" "A high-class entertainment club." When Lee Mengran spoke, she instinctively turned to look at Shui Yao Yao. As expected, her friend's eyes were filled with shock. Lee Mengran inhaled deeply before continuing. "Teacher Yang didn't bring me there right from the start. He only brought me there for supplementary lessons for the first few days." Lee Mengran took a deep breath before continuing. "Teacher Yang didn't bring me there right from the start. I spent the first 2 to 3 days at the cafe for supplementary lessons. Later on, he brought me there, saying I wasn't smart." Hearing this, Fu Jiu looked up. "What's the name of that high-class entertainment club?" "Pure Color." Lee Mengran added, "It's a famous place for entertainment in Jiang City. Many people go there, including our school students." However, Teacher Yang and the rest never play on the dance floor. Instead, they go to the private room. Fu Jiu drew a circle with her pen and wrote down the word, "Pure Color." Then she wrote another word, "Address." "Do you know where Yang Ming lives?" Lee Mengran shook her head. "Alright, I got it." As for the address, she would figure it out herself. Fu Jiu closed the notebook in her hands, glancing at Lee Mengran. "Let Yao Yao accompany you for the next 2 days. No matter where Yang asks you to go, don't go. Also, tell him that you already have a boyfriend. It wouldn't be good for you to go for extra lessons." "I know." Lee Mengran lowered her gaze. She didn't mention what would happen if her mother found out about this. His Highness Jiu had already done enough for her. She had to face the rest herself. Fu Jiu placed the pen down. "Bear with it for another 2 days. Everything will get better in 2 days." The final exams were in 2 days' time. The results weren't just important to Li Mengran, it was equally important to Shui Yao Yao and Fu Jiu. The incident on the school's forum was still brewing. There weren't just students here, there were also teachers who could teach. The reason why Fu Jiu would confess in front of everyone was because it was to create a topic for people to post on the forum. This was because, in Mr. Yang's computer preview, the most visited website was the school's Tieba. In order to hunt, she had to lure the target out. Besides, she didn't have much time. Fu Jiu glanced at the watch on her wrist. Things should be brewing soon. After Yang Ming saw the post, he wouldn't be able to sit still. Because the request on the chat log was very clear, it was also very obvious what the word taste meant. This was the only way she could think of to protect Li Mengran while allowing Yang Ming to act quickly. As the supplier, if the Xian heir had a boyfriend, Yang Ming would definitely be in trouble. Fu Jiu was right. In the office, Yang Ming's eyes were filled with anger after seeing the post. He had clearly warned the two of them that one of them should listen to him and the other should do what he was supposed to do. Didn't Li Mengran know? He had controlled her repeatedly, not allowing her to interact with other boys. Once the goods were no longer fresh, the higher-ups wouldn't be able to offer a high price. No way. He had to ask the higher-ups when they had more time. He had to push Li Mengran out in the next few days, in case something happened between her and the boy called Fu Jiu. Most importantly, a girl with a boyfriend would be too chaste. If he forced it, something bad might happen. With this thought, Yang Ming picked up the office phone to call Li Mengran's mother. When Mother Li heard that it was Teacher Yang, she hurriedly put down her work. Yang Ming pretended to be hesitant. "Madam Li, there's something I'm not sure if I should say." As Li Mengran's teacher, I think it's better for her to communicate with her parents. She's been getting closer to a boy from Class D recently and didn't attend tutoring on time for the past 2 times. Of course, this is just my guess after all. Teacher Yang, you don't have to say any more. Mother Li cut him off, her expression icy. I'll keep an eye on her in the future. Apart from tutoring, I won't allow her to have any more opportunities to socialize. Yang Ming sighed deeply. A parent like Madam Li is the best. She understands the thoughts of teachers like us. Don't be too agitated, it's better to focus on her studies. On the other side of the phone, Mother Li was completely brainwashed and wouldn't think of anything else. She even suspected that Teacher Yang had called because he hadn't given up on Mengran. With this thought, Mother Li was even more determined to discipline her daughter after she returned. On the other hand, after Yang Ming hung up, he picked up the car keys from the drawer and applied for leave from school, claiming that he had a terrible headache and wanted to head back early. Yang Ming was popular, it wasn't difficult to find a substitute teacher. Just like that, Yang Ming left the building. However, he didn't know that his actions had been seen by the young man sitting in the library. Chapter 553. Fu Jiu was still wearing her school uniform. She skateboarded across the field to keep up with Yang Ming's speed. At the very least, she had to leave before Yang Ming left the school gate. Fu Jiu stood there with one hand in her pocket. She glanced at the valiant guard at the school gate, and then at the wall next to her. He resolutely chose the latter. One word, flip. If the Almighty found out, he would probably laugh at her again. Master, please follow the golf in front. Of course, she wouldn't use her skateboard to chase after a car. Fu Jiu hailed a taxi and sat in the front passenger seat. Her eyes never left Yang Ming's direction. When the driver heard this, he immediately became interested. Is it a case? Fu Jiu saw that the middle-aged driver didn't move, so she immediately said, yes, so hurry up and don't let him escape. No problem. The middle-aged driver must have watched too many cop shows. Do you think he has any accomplices nearby? Does he have a gun? It's fine even if he has a gun. If he shoots the tires, I'll hit him. Fu Jiu, uncle, calm down. The middle-aged driver was very serious. I am a person who abhors evil. Fu Jiu agreed. I can see that, but this criminal is different. He has important clues on him, so we can only follow him without alerting him. Oh, so that's how it is. You should have told me earlier. The middle-aged driver turned the steering wheel and turned on his buddy's special voice. I'll ask my buddies to help you attack him from both sides. No matter where he goes, we'll be able to track him. Fujio smiled and immediately gave the driver a thumbs up. There was a terrible traffic jam along the way. After the driver confirmed the exact location of the Golf, he didn't care if it was against the rules or not. He opened the door and let Fujio get out to chase after it. Fujio had a skateboard, and once there was a traffic jam, she could make use of the skateboard's advantages. But before he left, he didn't forget to leave 1,000 yuan in the passenger seat. Fujio did some calculations. On the way here, Master had not only run a red light, but he had also violated the rules once. Yang Ming wasn't going back home. Don't ask how Fujio knew. The situation of a certain game was also written. Fujio glanced at the building. While Yang Ming was on the phone in the car, she threw her bag forward and began her disguise. Fujio put on her clothes very quickly. In just a minute, she had changed into another person. Yang Ming was still holding his phone in his hand. He didn't notice that there was another person behind him. It was only when he entered the elevator that he noticed the delivery boy beside him. He said into the phone, "Yes, I'll be right there." Then he hung up and moved back a little. Yang Ming had always looked down on these delivery men because they always had that kind of smell. He didn't have that kind of smell, but he still didn't want to have too much contact with them. In fact, if there was another elevator, he wouldn't want to stay in this elevator. However, the two of them were on the same floor. Who would have thought that someone on this floor would order takeout? Yang Ming frowned. When the elevator door opened, he strode out. Chapter 554. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. On the top floor of the Qin Corporation building, most of the Supreme Alliance members were looking at their phones. Is this true? It should be true. It's definitely Little Spade in the photo, and Little Spade looks like he's confessing. I can't believe it, Little Spade is taken just like that? Wait a minute, Little Spade should be the first member of our team to be single, right? What happened to being monks together? I'm unhappy. Yun, who was the only one who didn't speak, his gaze calm as he looked at the content of the post. Fujio was like him, so it was unlikely that he would have a girlfriend. But how could this be explained? Feng Yi came in with the proposal and saw the group of people grinding with their heads down. He arched a brow. Hurry up and practice your hand speed. Aren't you afraid of punishment for being so lazy? If you don't train hard now, you won't be able to attend Pure Colors celebration tonight. Fox, come here. Lin Feng shrugged, bringing Feng Yi to the side. He tapped on the picture. Look, isn't it exciting? Only Supreme Alliance's manager was like that. Feng Yi tried hard to maintain his intellectual image, pushing his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose. How strong can it be? Before he could finish his sentence, he snatched Lin Feng's phone and asked, "When did this happen?" About 3 hours ago. Lin Feng glanced at the photo again. It's a beautiful woman, and she looks very pure. In the past, Feng Yi didn't care about the relationships within the team. They didn't even have one here. It was best not to be in a relationship as it would lower their popularity. But it would be different if the other party was Fujio. Because after the masquerade party, Feng Yi really didn't know how Boss Qin felt about Fujio. Don't tell President Qin about this. Lin Feng was confused. Why did you tell Captain? This is a good thing. Little Spade had confessed so many times, but none of them were accepted. This time, he was finally accepted, and the other party was a beauty. The comments all said that Little Spade was handsome, like a prince. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar and pleasant voice rang out from behind Feng Yi. However, the voice was a little too cold at this moment. It was so cold that it made one's ears feel heavy. This is indeed a good thing. His tone was too slow and unhurried, which made him feel an indescribable pressure. Instantly, everyone quietened down. All of them raised their heads and looked at the door frame. Qin Mo stood there without any emotion on his face. However, his pure black eyes seemed to have sunk into an icy cold land, faintly emitting light. Lin Feng didn't know why, but he felt cold all over. When Qin Mo reached out and took the phone from his hand, the coldness in his eyes became even more obvious. Before entering, Chinemo was still thinking about how to slowly turn that person gay. After entering, Lin Feng's words seemed to have been imprinted in his mind. In addition to this photo on the forum, the young man was staring at the girl with a faint smile. The gentleness in the bottom of his eyes was so clear. Chapter 555. Feng Yi's heart skipped a beat as he watched from the side. Lin Feng also felt that his captain's grip was a little too strong. Wait a minute. Should he remind the captain that it was his phone, and it was a new one? But before Lin Feng could say anything, Chinemo lifted his lids, his voice faint. Are you guys so free? So free that you can gossip in the training room? Since that was the case, he had to increase the training intensity. Lin Feng. Was this considered an innocent bystander? Vice President Feng. Chinemo pointed at the photo, coldness in his eyes. Call this person over. Feng Yi coughed. Call him now? He had just confessed he should still be with that girl. What if he heard her voice? Chinemo didn't speak, just glancing at him. Feng Yi felt numb, immediately calling Fujio. Inside a certain building. Fujio, who was dressed in a delivery outfit, pressed down on the brim of her cap and was about to continue following Lu Ming. Suddenly, the phone in her pocket rang. Lu Ming, who was about to open the door, turned back immediately. He looked at the delivery boy with his head lowered and frowned. Fujio knew that it would be unnatural not to pick up the call. She held the plastic bag with one hand and took out the phone with the other, placing it by her ear. Is this the Qin Group building? I'll head over immediately after this order is over. Lu Ming wasn't in the mood to listen to a delivery boy's call, but his actions made him feel at ease. He pushed the door open, otherwise, he would think that this person was purposely following him. As Lu Ming entered, Fujio hung up. On the other side, Feng Yi was dumbfounded. What did he mean by heading over immediately after this order was over? Chinemo glanced at Feng Yi's expression. Pass me the phone. Feng Yi heard the busy tone and coughed again. He hung up. He should be busy. Busy? Chinemo sneered. Busy with a date? Lin Feng couldn't see anything, nodding heavily at the side. It's possible. Instantly, the atmosphere in the training room turned colder. Chinmo's entire body seemed to be covered by the white snow outside, extremely unapproachable. At this moment, Fujio was facing the second wave of trouble. I was talking about you. A woman in her 30s walked over in high heels. No one ordered takeout here, and unauthorized people are not allowed in. What are you doing here? Fujio looked up and exclaimed. Then she slapped her forehead. I remembered the wrong floor. That woman froze when she saw Fujio's face. It was rare to see such a handsome delivery boy. Fujio quickly bowed and apologized. I'm really sorry, madam. This is my first day at work, and I'm not familiar with this place. I'm getting a little dizzy as I walk. It's okay, it's okay. The woman was not someone who would deliberately make things difficult for anyone. Moreover, with such a little prince, no one could bear to say anything harsh. Just be careful next time. Hurry up and leave. Yes, yes, yes. Fujio nodded as she walked towards the elevator, not forgetting to smile at others. The woman looked at the slowly closing elevator and muttered to herself, I forgot to take a picture. This is definitely the most handsome delivery boy. But it didn't matter. They were in charge of this anyway. It would be the same to take pictures next time. Chapter 556. In the elevator on the other side of the wall. On the surface, Fujio's posture didn't change, but in fact, she had already pressed down on her black ear stud. After seeing this building, she knew that she couldn't use a network attack. Not to mention the fact that any organization's network firewall was especially thorough. Plus, there was a camera at every step. She couldn't hack the system here in a short period of time. Taking out the notebook meant that there would be traces left. Which delivery boy would bring a notebook to work? The police weren't stupid. They would definitely investigate if there was anything suspicious. Moreover, there was the country's most stringent security system here. If there was any problem, someone would definitely call the police. That was why she took the risk to be so close to Lu Ming. Not for anything else, but to install a small listening device. The listening device was accidentally installed through the collision in the elevator. Therefore, even if there was a video in the future, the police wouldn't suspect a delivery boy. She was very clear about the police procedure. There was no signal in the elevator. Fu Jiu could only hear the buzzing sound. It was different after exiting the elevator. Although the sound wasn't very loud, it was enough to hear the conversation clearly. "Don't worry, no one knows I'm here." It was Lu Ming's voice. The two people in front of her should have already had a conversation. The other party was very vigilant. This was Fu Jiu's impression of him. "Why are you in such a hurry?" The other person's voice sounded a little impatient. Lu Ming lowered his voice. "It's the little girl that Deputy Lu fancied last time. She hasn't been easy to control recently." "You haven't touched her yet. Why is she not easy to control? I keep feeling that she doesn't listen to me anymore. She even got a boyfriend." "Boyfriend?" That person was a little angry after hearing these 3 words. "Deputy Lu likes the original, don't you know that?" "Of course I know that, the younger the better." Lu Ming said, "How about this, I'll bring that little girl to pure color today, so that she won't be dirty in the future." That person was still hesitant. "Didn't you say that she's a rebellious person, unlike those students who sell themselves? If something happens that she doesn't want to, she might cause trouble in school. That girl is very afraid of her mother. After that, she will have to think about it. If this kind of thing really blows up, it will be bad for our reputation. At that time, we can just give her a little more money. As long as we take the money, the nature of this matter will be different. In addition, her grades are still in my hands. What can she do as a student? Nowadays, some high school students would take the initiative to chase after famous brands and sleep with others. Who knew if she had agreed or not? All right, we'll do as you say." When Fu Jiu heard this, she zipped up her jacket. At this time, she had already left the vicinity of the building and changed back into her school uniform. Fu Jiu was very clear that even if she recorded the entire conversation, it wouldn't be considered as the most critical evidence in court. Without the real video and the corresponding person, the other party might very well say that it was a false accusation. It seemed like she would have to make a trip to pure color. Before that, she had to make a trip back home to prepare everything. The phone in his pocket rang again. Chapter 557. Fu Jiu paused, picking up the call. "Hello, brother. You aren't in school, where are you?" Qin Mo's tone was indiscernible. That was why Fu Jiu was so cautious. "Outside. You're with Li Mengran." Qin Mo's tone was heavy. Fu Jiu chuckled. "How do you know? What do you think?" With that, Qin Mo hung up. At this moment, there was no one around him. The cold expression on his face couldn't be seen. He had never felt this way before. The moment he closed his eyes, the image of the youngster's confession would appear in his mind. What was he doing now? Was he dating? Did he hold the girl's hand or kiss her? That was when he thought of the latter. Qin Mo couldn't control his urge to smoke. That was what he did, pulling open his collar with one hand, a huge pile of cigarette butts in front of him. Amidst the lingering smoke, a pair of deep eyes could be vaguely seen. When Director Huang pushed the door open, the first thing he smelled was the smell of cigarettes. He was slightly surprised since in his impression of the aloof young man, he had never smoked so heavily. But the person in the office chair was still aloof and dignified. Hence, even an experienced detective like Director Huang couldn't tell if he was in a bad mood. "I thought you would never contact me again." Director Huang sat opposite Qin Mo. "How is it? You agreed to come back?" Qin Mo crossed his long legs and seemed distracted. "No, I didn't." "No." Director Huang took a deep breath. How many years had it been since he had been angered like this? He was called over just to hear a word of no? "Then why did you call me over?" Director Huang widened his eyes. Qin Mo tilted his head, lighting another cigarette. "I'm purely interested in the Z you guys are talking about. I can interfere in this case, but there's one condition." "Say it." As long as he could interfere, he would agree to any price. Chin Mo's voice was calm. I won't be appearing, I will send you guys when I need you. Don't tell anyone about my participation. Why? Director Huang had to ask. Chin Mo only said one word, you're a burden. Director Huang. Only this kid dared to disregard the crime squad. Would they hold him back? Would it? Take out the information. Chin Mo sat up straight, but there wasn't any warmth in his eyes. Director Huang arched a brow. What information? You came all the way here because you knew that I would go back. How could you not bring the case files with you? Chin Mo tugged at his collar again. He had to do something to distract himself. Otherwise, he would really find the youngster and strip him naked. He would let him know who he belonged to. He knew that it was wrong to think this way, but he just couldn't control it. Director Huang didn't think of such a relationship. He wasn't happy that the kid had seen through everything. However, the case was more important. He opened his briefcase. All the clues we have are in here. Chin Mo lowered his lids to look at the photos and records. Director Huang couldn't help but ask, can you tell me why you didn't return? Chapter 558. Director Huang shook his head. That's my son's game. That's right, the scariest thing when playing hero is encountering a teammate who is in trouble. In a 5v5 match, if there's a primary school student in the team, not only can you not rely on him to kill, you have to protect him at all times, to prevent him from sending himself to the enemy. Chin Mo's gaze wavered. It's the same for solving cases. Director Huang. Wasn't he referring to them as a primary school student? Who exactly did he take his venomous tongue from? There are too many clues and most of them are useless. Chin Mo placed the photo down. If the other party is really Z, you should consider what her initial actions were. She has always been a schemer from the start, everything else is just a cover-up. Director Huang puffed out his beer belly. What do you mean if the culprit is Z? Do you think she isn't? No one knows for sure who the culprit is until the end. Chin Mo took out a pen and drew a question mark. Have you sent anyone to investigate the internet cafes? Director Huang coughed lightly. Chin Mo placed the pen down, a hint of a smile on his face. Director Huang felt a little embarrassed. Before I came, I was about to get my men to investigate. You better stop talking. Chin Mo really didn't speak, continuing to flip through the photo casually. Director Huang coughed again. Why don't you tell me what you are investigating, the turnover of staff? Turnover of staff isn't useful. Chin Mo drew another circle. There are thousands of internet cafes in Jiang City and the cashiers wouldn't remember a person's face. Investigating the turnover of staff isn't just a waste of time, it isn't targeted either. You have to ask if the computers in the internet cafes have malfunctioned recently. For example, when someone was playing a game, the numbers suddenly jumped. It seemed like a virus or sometimes the computer wouldn't be under control. If there is, inform me immediately. Director Huang wasn't dumb enough to ask why they were investigating this. It was obviously a campaign against hackers. How are you so sure Z would make a move in the internet cafes? Chin Mo glanced up. There's an 80% chance. Firstly, it's Z's personal habits. Secondly, the internet cafes are useful for concealing her true identity. Thirdly, it would exhaust the police's energy. Director Huang. Did all hackers think so much these days? However, that might not be the case. Chin Mo's gaze deepened when he saw the last sentence, I'm back. Director Huang couldn't keep up with his train of thought. He whipped out his phone. I'll get them to investigate now. Chin Mo replied. After his analysis, his thoughts returned to his phone. The screen was dark. This also meant that the person had no intention of replying to the message to explain. Explain? Speaking of which, there was nothing much to explain. After all, in that guy's heart, he was at most a brother who had a slightly better relationship with him. There was no need for him to explain anything. He even thought of pushing him to someone else. From this, it could be seen how he viewed their relationship. He was well aware of the youth's ability to seduce people. If the youth took the initiative, no one would reject that kind of face and the way the young man smiled. Not to mention a kiss that tasted like candy. Chapter 559. With that, Chin Mo tightened his grip, using his connections for the first time. There's something else. What is it? Director Huang was agitated, thinking it was a new lead. Chin Mo wrote a phone number on the paper. Help me track this person, I want to know his location. Suspect? Director Huang's eyes lit up. Chin Mo replied faintly, no, this is the reward for interfering in the case. Which meant it was a private matter. Director Huang rejected immediately. No way, I can't locate him like that. Is that so? Chin Mo pushed the document forward. Then I'll have to trouble Director Huang to hire someone else to handle this case. Youth. Director Huang clenched his teeth. No, what did he do to you? Why did you have to locate him out of nowhere? Don't you know that's an invasion of privacy? Chin Mo tapped his fingers on the table, replying leisurely, it's just a location, it's not enough. Director Huang was speechless. He knew he was serious, but he wasn't sure what the owner of the number had done wrong for him to be targeted. I'll help you locate him, but you can't do anything to hurt him. Chin Mo's lips curved upwards, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. That depends on what he does. What do you mean by what? Director Huang pointed at him. Don't mess around. Chin Mo extinguished the cigarette in the ashtray, a hint of a smile on his face. Director Huang, you're thinking too much. He's my team member, what can I do? At most, he would handcuff him back home, leaving him with no strength to get off the bed. Not to mention confessing his love for her. Beneath the handsome face was possessiveness. It was a pity Director Huang couldn't see through it. But under normal circumstances, he wouldn't treat anyone in such a manner. Honestly, he had only gotten the police to locate the phone number when he was tracking the criminal. Other than the criminal, this was the first time, Fu family's villa. Fu Jio wasn't aware that her location was being tracked. But there was one thing. She was still concerned about the Almighty's call. She had always known that the Almighty wasn't an easy opponent. Therefore, from the very beginning, he had foreshadowed her involvement in this matter. That was to become Li Mingran's boyfriend. Even if one day the Almighty found out that she was the one who did it, she also had an excuse to say that it was because the other party was her girlfriend and that she had to do it out of anger. This was the only way to hide her identity as Z. Fu Jio looked at herself in the mirror. She was wearing a girl's school uniform with a knee-length skirt and a white blouse. Everything about her looked youthful. The bad thing was that Fu Jio's looks were too devilish, and she couldn't be pure even if she wanted to. But at least she had a layer of disguise that could blend in. 6:40. It would take about an hour to reach pure color from here. And this was under the condition that there was no traffic jam. In other words, she would be able to reach pure color at around 8 o'clock. Fu Jio looked up, and her slender fingers tied a bow in front of her collar. There was a small infrared camera hidden in the bow. She confirmed the time again, and before she left, she bound all the webcast platform accounts that were not broadcasting live at this time. Chapter 560. A video shot under abnormal circumstances, no matter how clear it was, would be treated as invalid evidence in a lawsuit. Besides, Fu Jio already knew who she was up against this time. She wouldn't go to court. Wouldn't it be a joke for a hacker like her to go to court? She wasn't afraid of being rich, but she was afraid of being rich and powerful. Fu Jio didn't deny the existence of the light. But in this world, there were too many distortions. The younger ones could change their faces and pretend to be wronged after scolding others. Those with power looked dignified, but in reality, no one knew what they were. She couldn't give the other party a chance to retaliate. If that happened, Li Mingran's reputation would be tarnished. Yang Ming was smart. He knew that even if he was exposed, he would still have a way to retaliate. That was probably how it was in China. If a girl was bullied, there would always be people who would jump out and say that there was something wrong with the girl's behavior. What was more frightening was that according to the statistics, a large portion of those who blamed the girl were women. They would use words that you wouldn't be able to imagine. For example, AB** teach. Fujio had never been kind, she was well aware of human nature. Because of that, she had jumped out at the first opportunity to give Lee Mengran the identity of her girlfriend. That way, after the incident, at least no one would accuse Lee Mengran of doing it for money. Because her boyfriend wasn't just handsome, he was also rich. At this thought, Fujio lifted her head and glanced at the rear mirror. She couldn't be handsome anymore, she had to be beautiful. The statistics started. It wasn't that easy to infiltrate the live stream platform. On the contrary, because it was online, there were many loopholes. This gave Fujio a certain degree of convenience. A recording was broadcasted on over 10 live stream platforms. Moreover, the accounts that were tied to them were slightly famous streamers. Hence, after the recording was broadcasted, a wave of discussion broke out. F***ck, did I enter the wrong channel? No, this is my goddess live stream room. Why isn't there a recording? And it's a recording of 2 men. Previous poster, don't speak, listen carefully. F***ck. Disgusting. Where did this recording come from? Who are they talking about? That person mentioned the girl and the results? He said that he controlled the other party's results. This is clearly something that only a teacher can do. Damn it, he's a scum. Tell me, who is he? I'm going to kill him. And the result? What was the result? He only released half of it. Will something happen to the girl? After listening to this recording, I think I need to ask my sister if she has been bullied at school recently. I won't let my daughter only care about results in the future. Wait a minute, look at the comments on the platform. If you want to know more, come to room 009 at 8 p.m. sharp. Everyone would see the last sentence after listening to the recording. That night, people really couldn't even eat anymore. After listening, he went to room 009. All of a sudden, the number of visitors on the platform reached a new height, and it was still increasing. Because there were only 20 minutes left before the live broadcast. In this short period of 20 minutes, not to mention that the person who said these words did not react, even the police would not notice it. Chapter 561. At the same time, in the Qin Group's building, Director Huang, who was about to leave, received a call. Live stream. His brows furrowed tightly. It's really strange. Immediately find out where the person sent this message. Also, send the address of the person's live stream to my phone. Send it immediately. Yes. After the person on the other side finished speaking, he hung up. Director Huang turned towards Qin Mo. I'm afraid before we find Z, there's something I need your help with. Qin Mo arched a brow. Director Huang lowered his voice. An hour ago, someone posted a voice message on the live stream. Listen to it. As he spoke, he pressed his cell phone. Qin Mo listened to the voice message, his side profile still handsome. Play it again. Even though Director Huang was doubtful of his decision, he still did as he was told. So, Qin Mo pressed his left hand on the table and stood up. If I were you, I would check the surnames of all the deputies and deputy directors in Jiang City. Lock onto the one with the surname Liu and see how many of them are there. After that, check their schedule for today. Director Huang was instantly enlightened. In the voice message, that person called the other party deputy Liu. Qin Mo's voice was calm, but it was lethal. Deputy Liu is only used in the officialdom. Director Huang felt that his trip wasn't in vain. The youngster in front of him was born to do this. Be it in the past or now, as long as he was around, he would solve cases quickly. Hence, the rate of solving cases in Jiang City was extremely high. But who could have imagined that he would be a high school student back then? Director Huang was excited. He immediately dialed his subordinate's number. But on the other end, Qin Mo's voice didn't change. It's too late. What? Director Huang turned, arching a brow. Qin Mo listened to the voice message, opening his silver business laptop to head to the live stream room. The number of people in the room was unprecedented. Qin Mo glanced at the netizens, glancing up. There's less than 20 minutes left. By the time you find out, the live stream might have ended. Then what should we do? Director Huang might be experienced, but he hasn't been in contact with such cases. Qin Mo was different. He pointed at the screen, his gaze calm. Go downstairs and get in the car. Wait for the live broadcast to start. The various police stations will be ready. Open up a dedicated lane and race all the way to the end. This is the most time-saving method. All right, I'll get them to stand by. Director Huang was starting to panic. It was hard not to pay attention to such a voice message. No one had the guts to fabricate such a thing. This was because if the content was false, the publisher would face imprisonment of more than 5 years. Therefore, this was not a topic that anyone was stirring up. It could very well be true. The tricky part was whether it was real or not. If the content of this voice message was true, this would be a case of student trafficking, and the person involved would not have a simple background. Director Huang might be a little greedy, but he would never do something that crossed the line. Just who was it, such a beast? Chapter 562. The person who posted this isn't a newbie. Qin Mo's voice came over again. The police probably haven't found out who posted this. Director Huang coughed. Everyone is still working hard on this. Working hard until the matter is over? Qin Mo lifted the corner of his lips and pressed the internal line in the office. Call Fatty over, it's not training. Tell him that it's something he's most interested in, tracking hackers. Hackers? Director Huang's eyes widened when he heard that word. Did you just say hackers? Within a day, more than 30 famous online platforms broadcasted this voice recording at the same time. Other than hackers, no one would be able to do that. Qin Mo stood up as he spoke, his long fingers buttoning his coat. He exuded an aura of abstinence from the inside out. 7:45 p.m. There were only 15 minutes left before the live broadcast would begin. Fu Jiao glanced at the time on her watch once more. She lifted her lids towards the dazzling building. Countless celebrities and luxury cars drove in slowly. No one noticed that there was a 24-hour convenience store opposite Pure Color with a great view. If someone took a closer look, they would definitely see that in the dining area near the window, there was an ordinary Odin beside a silver-white Apple laptop. The person sitting in front of the laptop had her face covered. Her fingers were on the keyboard, typing furiously. The crisp sound of the keyboard was very emotional. It seemed like she was playing a game. But in reality, one look at her screen and they would know that she wasn't playing a game. She wasn't playing a game. Strings of code danced in her black pupils, indicating that this was a cyber attack. A place like Pure Color might seem to have a good security system, but the internet was very weak. After all, the more people used the internet, the more loopholes there would be. Especially in the surveillance room, it was easy to find loopholes. Fu Jiao's fingers moved quickly. In less than 3 minutes, the virus was implanted into the system. Of course, she needed to continue the activation of the virus. The laptop couldn't be carried around. But the tablet could. The laptop would be the host and would be left here to conduct the live broadcast. After Fu Jiao was done, she stood up and ordered another order of Odin. She also asked the cashier where the washroom was. The goal was to give the impression that she hadn't left, to keep the cashier from touching her notebook. The cashier felt that Fu Jiao looked familiar, but that was all. It was probably because Fu Jiao was too beautiful, especially when she smiled. Her eyes were like crescent moons. Bathroom? The bathroom is just behind here. Turn left after you go out. Thank you. Fu Jiao curled her lips again. After she walked out, she didn't turn left. Instead, she walked straight towards Pure Color. There were only 5 minutes left before the live broadcast officially began. However, she couldn't go in by herself. She was waiting for Lu Ming, the bait. Time passed little by little. Lu Ming looked at the endless stream of cars in front of him and glanced at the person in the passenger seat. We can't drive in anymore. Get out from here. Chapter 563. Before she left, her mother's words were still echoing in her ears. Don't think that I don't know what you've been doing in school. Your grades have already started to drop. You can't only be happy when you get the last place in your exams. Who is your boyfriend? I'm going to his house and ask his mother. He has to take responsibility for seducing my daughter. Fine, you're not going to call? If you're not going to call, you can just follow Teacher Lu. You can choose between the two. I consider myself an open-minded parent, and I also understand that children who have entered puberty are curious about everything, so they want to fall in love. But look at yourself. You don't even want to go to cram school just to fall in love? Where did you put all the effort your father and I put into you? Li Mingran's words were stuck in her throat. To ensure that she didn't fall behind, her family didn't forget to teach her piano while studying. Every day, her father would work overtime until 9 at night. Almost the entire family's efforts were spent on her. The best products to nourish her brain, the best one-to-one English lessons, and the best dressing. It was all for her to enter a good university in a stable state. At times, this stubbornness seemed to seep into her bones. Hence, her mother had always been obedient to her teacher. Even in the end, she would still thank him profusely. No matter how much she cried and refused to go. Her mother still opened the car door and pushed her in. The moment she sat down, Li Mengran felt despair. She wanted to ask for help. But the price of that would be bringing trouble to the youngster. He was the hottest new esports player in the country, be it his results or future, he was like a shining light. If her mother caused a ruckus in school, not only would the youngster's reputation be tarnished, even his results would be affected. The moment he failed, he wouldn't be able to participate in the National League. Such a rule was right in front of her. She couldn't be that selfish. Because Li Mengran was clear that the National League wasn't just the youngster's dream, it was Yao Yao's. Her best friend's eyes lit up when she said those words. That was good. Li Mengran thought as she tightened her grip on the blade in her hands. She would do as that person said on the internet. This bunch of people would probably go to hell. Li Mengran lowered her head. Lu Ming couldn't see the girl's expression, so he didn't notice the hatred in her eyes. Fu Jiao, who had been hiding in the darkness, paused when she caught sight of Li Mengran, returning to her original position. The worst had happened. Fu Jiao's eyes darkened. She knew that Li Mengran wouldn't agree to appear here, which meant that she had resisted and failed. If there were acquaintances around, she would have to be careful not to expose her face too obviously. But these were small matters. The most important thing was that Li Mengran could not be injured. It seemed like she had to speed up. Fu Jiao slid her finger across the tablet, and the virus program was activated. All the cameras turned around at the same time. No one knew. The security guard who went to the washroom did not see the change of position of the camera. Just like that, Fu Jiao, who was dressed like a student, followed Lu Ming into pure color while ensuring that no images would be left behind. At the same time, that scene was broadcasted live on the internet. Chapter 564. The eyes of the netizens, who were looking forward to it, lit up. The comments flooded the screen. Video? There's a video. Wait a minute, where is this? Why does it look so familiar? I can only say this is a nightclub. F***ck. I remember now, this is pure color. There's no mistaking it, this is pure color. Pure color? Fatty glanced sideways at Captain, who was sitting beside him. Qin Mo crossed his legs and turned his face to the side. His eyes were pitch black and his overly fair skin made him look like a vampire aristocrat. Especially when he gave the order, that lazy and cold aura was even more prominent. Begin the attack, lock onto the opponent. Yes. Fatty was genuinely excited. He had never been like this in a car. How should he put it? His fingers were trembling. Director Huang glanced at the back of the car. He's fine. He'll get motion sickness at most. Qin Mo's voice wasn't faint. Locking onto the IP address of the livestream on the road would save them a lot of time. The sound of the keyboard clattered. At this moment, Qin Mo glanced down at his phone. He still hadn't replied. 3 minutes into the livestream, the number of viewers had already exceeded 10 million. No one knew how the livestream had managed to capture these images. But from the video, they could see that the person was walking forward. Pure Color would enter the carnival stage at night. As she walked around the lobby, there were many beautiful girls, many of whom looked very young. Fu Jiu walked casually, just like the countless people who came to have fun. But no one could tell that she had a camera on her black bow tie. In fact, entering such a nightclub required a full body scan. But Lu Ming didn't. Hence, when Fu Jiu paused, she narrowed her eyes. Fortunately, she didn't bring anything, so she passed quickly. But this way, there was still a distance between them. Lu Ming didn't stop at the lobby. Instead, he walked to the corridor and seemed to make a call. Fu Jiu was just about to walk forward when she heard a familiar voice. F***CK, there are still as many people here as usual. It seems like there's hope for us monks to get rid of our single status. It was Lin Feng. Fu Jiu's eyes widened. She suddenly moved to the side and avoided those people who were walking towards her. It wasn't just Lin Feng, there was also Yun Hu, Feng Shang, and the others. Almost all the Supreme Alliance members were there. Only then did Fu Jiu remember that Manager Feng had said before that he would take them to Pure Color to have some fun so that they could prepare for the national competition in the future. If that's the case, does that mean the Almighty is also here? Fu Jiu's legs were still moving forward, but her mind was filled with many thoughts. Firstly, she couldn't let anyone in Supreme Alliance see her. Secondly, she had to avoid the Almighty. Of course, this was not the main point. The most important thing was the bodyguards in front. It was obvious that the other side of the corridor was not a place ordinary people could enter. Li Mingran's back was right in front of him. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes and silently counted to 15 before approaching the corridor. "Miss, this place does not allow unauthorized people to enter. Please leave." Fu Jiu looked like she was scared, and she said in a soft voice, "The teacher asked me to come here for tutoring. I must have made a mistake. I'll go somewhere else." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.